Hey guys, tonight we slip back into a time when mornings didn't begin with alarms or hot showers, but with the creak of wood, the rustle of straw, and the undeniable aroma of damp wool. You're waking up in your tiny cottage in ancient Egypt, sometime around 1350 BCE, just as the orange haze of dawn creeps in through a reed-covered window. The walls around you are made of mud brick, baked by the sun, stacked by hand, and flaking slightly where the family goat once tried to eat them. The air is dry, but the room smells like stale grain and smoke from last night's fire. Your bed, if we can be generous, is a lumpy mattress stuffed with reeds and palm fibers, woven into a ropey mess that creaks every time you shift. There's no pillow, unless you count the carved wooden headrest that's supposed to support your neck, but mostly supports your suffering. You'd toss and turn if it weren't for the fact that linen sheets are in short supply, and you're clinging to the only clean one like it's sacred. Somewhere nearby, a rooster starts screaming like he just remembered he's a rooster. A donkey brays in protest, maybe because the rooster stole his thunder. Outside, the street, if you can call it that, is already coming to life. You can hear your neighbor sweeping the dirt floor of her front porch, as if it makes a difference, while a child cries over spilled lentils. These are your morning soundtracks: livestock, barefoot toddlers, and the occasional yelling match over borrowed tools that were never returned. Inside your home, there's barely enough space to stretch. The ceiling hangs low, supported by wooden beams you constantly bump your head on. Your younger sibling, still snoring beside you, kicks you once in the shin before rolling over into a sack of barley. Your parents are already up, possibly praying or squabbling over who forgot to cover the grain jars. The hearth is smoldering in the center of the room, and someone's trying to coax it back to life with a handful of dried palm fronds and very low expectations. This home, while simple, is actually considered pretty decent by village standards. You have 4 walls, a roof, and a decent cooking pot. Some others aren't so lucky. Families often share cramped quarters with animals, chickens roosting indoors, goats occasionally chewing through storage baskets. You've at least managed to keep your goat outside, although she does occasionally headbutt the door when she's bored. As you rise, you duck instinctively. The ceiling's low enough that even an average-height Egyptian like you risks starting the day with a concussion. You fumble for your linen kilt. It's somewhere under the pile of laundry that never got finished last week. You wipe your face with a damp cloth, not because it helps much, but because it's what your mother insists keeps your soul pure. This is how your day begins. Not with a fresh espresso or inspirational podcast, but with dust in your mouth and a mild sense of regret that you were born before indoor plumbing. And yet, oddly, it's comforting, familiar, predictable in its chaos. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Feel free to drop your location and what time you're watching. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle barefoot toward the hearth, still blinking away the sleep as your toes instinctively avoid the rough spots on the floor, places where the mud has chipped, or the goat tried to break in again. The fire has finally taken, though it coughs more smoke than warmth. Your mother drops a small clay pan onto the embers, her expression already one of pre-coffee exhaustion. Except, of course, there is no coffee. There's just breakfast, and it's about as glamorous as you'd expect from a world where forks haven't been invented yet. Today's offering? A couple slices of yesterday's flatbread, hardened into a shape that could double as roofing tile, and some mashed fava beans that have been sitting in a covered pot overnight. The bread is made from emmer wheat, a grain that's more nutritious than tasty, and the flavor rests somewhere between edible and you'll survive. It's gritty too, thanks to bits of sand and groundstone that get into the flour during milling. Dental records from actual mummies show serious tooth wear, and now you understand why. You pick at your slice, tearing off a piece with effort and dipping it into the bean mash, which is flavored with onion, garlic, and the faint hope that someday spices will be discovered. It's not bad exactly, just consistent. Ancient Egyptian breakfast doesn't like surprises. If you're lucky, someone remembered to leave out a chunk of goat cheese last night, and it's just soft enough not to break your molars. If you're unlucky, the cheese has developed a rind that fights back. Sometimes there's beer. Not the crisp golden beverage you're imagining, but a thick, yeasty porridge in a clay mug. It's made from partially baked bread fermented in water, and it's mildly alcoholic, just enough to make you forget the taste. Kids drink it too, mostly because clean water is harder to find than patience in this house. It's warm, sour, and oddly chewy, like if soup had a career crisis and became a beverage. You eat slowly, more because there's not much food than because you're savoring it. Meals are dictated by what's left over from the night before, what's been bartered for in the village, or what hasn't been stolen by rats. Your little brother complains there's no honey today. There wasn't any yesterday either. Your mother rolls her eyes. She'll tell him bees are sacred and shouldn't be bothered, but really it's just too expensive. Outside, you hear another neighbor yelling about a missing chicken. Your father grunts. He's halfway through his breakfast and already wearing that 1,000-yard stare that says, "It's going to be a long day, and I've got to haul bricks." You think of all the people who've eaten this exact meal before you, centuries of workers, scribes, priests, all starting their day with beans, onions, and dreams of soft cheese. No one's talking about breakfast as the most important meal of the day here. It's just the meal that comes before the real struggle begins. But it's filling enough, or at least it's supposed to be. Once your bread's been chewed down to something resembling a soggy pebble, it's time to move on with the day. Or at least try to, within the crowded clay confines of your home. You live with your parents, 2 siblings, and depending on the mood of the livestock, a goat who occasionally thinks she pays rent. Your home is a single-room structure, roughly the size of a modern studio apartment. If that apartment came without windows, plumbing, privacy, or doors that properly close. The floor is hardened earth, packed tightly from years of foot traffic and the occasional spilled stew. At the center is the hearth, which doubles as kitchen, heater, and general hazard to barefoot family members. Around it are clay jars of lentils, grains, and dried herbs, some covered with linen scraps, others sealed with hardened mud plugs to keep out rats, though they've evolved impressive problem-solving skills. Your sleeping space transforms into a living area with remarkable efficiency. Straw mats are rolled up, baskets of clothing pushed into corners, and low stools shuffled into semicircles for breakfast or storytelling. High on the walls, reed shelves store your family's most prized items. A copper mirror, a couple wooden combs, and a stylus set wrapped in linen. There's also a drying rack that smells permanently like fish, thanks to its dual use for food and laundry. Roles in the household are well-defined and, let's say, non-negotiable. Your father handles outside labor, farming, trading, temple obligations. Your mother, meanwhile, runs the inside with a system of efficiency that would terrify a military commander. She knows exactly how many lentils remain, when the neighbor's baby is due, and which village woman still owes her a cooking pot from last year's festival. She's also in charge of discipline, delegation, and deeply disappointed sighs. You and your siblings aren't just kids, you're assistants. Your older sister tends the fire, prepares the dough, and grinds the grain with a saddle quern, which looks like a flat rock but works like a torture device. Your younger brother feeds the animals, sweeps the floor, and mostly gets in the way. You haul water, lots of it. Every morning, before the sun fully rises, you trudge to a nearby well or canal with clay jugs slung over your shoulder like it's your destiny to develop shoulder pain by age 16. Bathing, such as it is, happens with a splash from one of those jugs, standing behind the house while someone pretends not to look. You'll get properly washed at the Nile later, but until then, rubbing your face with a damp cloth and calling it a cleansing ritual will have to suffice. And all of this is normal, routine, expected. In fact, this structure of roles and repetitions keeps the household together. It may be cramped, dusty, and goat-adjacent, but it's home. And in ancient Egypt, where chaos lurks beyond every sand dune, a little structure goes a long way. By the time the full sun climbs above the horizon, the heat is already humming against the mud brick walls. And the difference between you and someone of higher status becomes embarrassingly obvious. Because while you're gathering your things to begin the day, possibly dragging a reluctant sibling by the ear, a noble's morning has only just begun, and it's starting with a massage. Or scented oils, possibly both. Social class in ancient Egypt isn't subtle. You can tell who belongs where by looking at their clothing, their skin, their jewelry, or the absence of it. The rich wear bleached linen that actually stays white. Yours is more like sun-toasted beige, and it's a bit stiff from being washed in the Nile with crushed lotus petals and wishful thinking. A wealthier Egyptian might spend this hour sipping date wine under a shaded veranda, dictating letters to a servant while planning their afternoon hunting trip. Meanwhile, you're wondering if that buzzing sound means the flies are back. Your village is mostly made up of working folk, farmers, herders, fishers, and tradespeople. Each person wakes early because the sun isn't just a natural light source. It's your entire work schedule. The day begins with Ra's rise and ends with his departure. No one in your social class has candles or oil lamps bright enough to work by at night, unless you're lucky enough to borrow one from a neighbor, and unlucky enough to be blamed when it breaks. And yet, there's an entire class above you, for whom the sun is more of a background aesthetic. These are priests, scribes, temple officials, and local elites, who often live in larger homes with courtyards, furniture, and sometimes even plastered walls. They have servants who prepare their food, apply their makeup, and fetch their water. You, meanwhile, are the servant, just not officially. Your role is inherited by proximity to poverty. The hierarchy even determines what gods you worship most loudly. You say prayers to local fertility and household deities, maybe Taweret or Bes, for protection, grain, and a drama-free week. The elite, though, are making offerings in elaborate temple complexes, having their prayers carved into limestone walls by artists who went to school for it. Your prayers are drawn in charcoal on the side of your bread jar and scrubbed away by the next rain. The caste-like nature of Egyptian society means upward mobility is rare, but not impossible. If you're clever, lucky, or unusually literate, you might rise through the ranks, become a scribe, a priest, even a tax collector if you're willing to be universally disliked. But for now, the class you're born into is the one that decides whether you begin your morning with a servant fanning you, or with your sibling elbowing you in the ribs over the last spoonful of beans. So as the sun climbs higher and the temperature turns from warm to "why is my skin buzzing?" remember, if the heat doesn't get you, the social ladder probably will. Now that your body's more or less awake and the sun has officially declared war on everyone without shade, it's time to get dressed. Not a dramatic event, but one that comes with its own small absurdities. You don't have a closet. You have a clay storage bin and a woven basket, both full of linen wraps and hand-me-downs that haven't seen a proper wash cycle since the reign of Amenhotep. Your main garment is a kilt, not the plaid kind. This is a plain rectangle of linen wrapped tightly around your waist, tucked and tied in a way that suggests every family has its own secret technique. The linen is coarse, a bit scratchy, and depending on how long ago it was last soaked in natron and stomped on, it might still carry the faint aroma of river sludge. Underwear? Optional. Usually skipped. If you're of higher status, say a scribe or temple servant, you might have a longer tunic, pleated even, though maintaining those pleats in a world without irons is a feat of sorcery. For women, the style involves longer linen dresses with shoulder straps, and sometimes decorative beads, though beads are a luxury. Most settle for practicality. Breasts are often uncovered, and no one blinks. The sun, after all, sees everything. Modesty takes a back seat to heatstroke prevention. You might tie a sash around your waist or tuck a reed knife into your belt, just in case something needs cutting. Footwear? Papyrus sandals, if you're lucky. If you're really lucky, they're not too tight or brittle yet. Many just go barefoot. It's not comfortable, but it's less risky than wearing shoes with soles that fall off at random intervals while you're carrying a water jug. Getting dressed isn't a private affair. Your family's home is one room, and modesty is a luxury reserved for the temple and maybe noble women. You learn to avert your gaze politely and pretend you didn't see your brother trying to squeeze into a kilt 2 sizes too small. Clothing also tells others exactly who you are. If your linen is bleached white, you probably work indoors or have enough wealth to not roll in the dirt for a living. If it's yellowing and patched in 3 places, well, you're one of the rest of us. The cleanest garments are worn to temples or festivals. On regular days, functionality comes first. There are no buttons, zippers, or toggles. Everything is tied, tucked, or fastened with a simple clasp if you're lucky enough to own one. Some wealthier folks wear broad collars of faience beads, bangles, or even a protective amulet carved from carnelian or turquoise. You have a nice piece of string and an old scarab someone said was lucky. As you look yourself over, bare feet, creased kilt, skin already shiny with oil and sweat, you sigh. You're technically ready. That doesn't mean you're excited. But in ancient Egypt, the line between clothed and sufficiently covered not to be arrested by a priest is pretty thin. You'll pass. Before you even think about stepping into the blinding Egyptian sun, there's one more step in your morning routine, and it's not optional. You reach for the small jar sitting near the hearth, scoop out a dollop of thick, slightly gritty oil, and begin the ritual greasing of your limbs. Yes, oiling your body is as common as brushing your teeth would be in a few thousand years. The goal? Moisturize, protect, and maybe even look a little shiny while you're at it. Ancient Egyptian life is unrelentingly dry. The desert climate robs your skin of moisture within minutes of stepping outside. This oil, often castor, moringa, or animal fat mixed with herbs, is your only defense. You rub it into your arms, legs, chest, and neck, ignoring the fact that it never fully absorbs. It sits there like a warm glaze, coating you in a sheen that reflects the morning light and attracts every speck of dust in a 10-mile radius. If you're well off, your oil might be perfumed, jasmine, myrrh, or lotus essence if you're trying to impress someone or visit the temple. But you're not well off, and the oil you're using smells faintly like something that once came from a goat. Still, it does the job. Sort of. For wealthier Egyptians, this ritual isn't just about skincare. It's aesthetic. You want to look radiant, slick, and divine. Statues of gods are oiled in temples daily, and mortals do their best to mimic that glow. Being dry and flaky is socially equivalent to wearing your tunic backward with onion on your breath. Everyone notices and no one says anything, but they'll remember. The process takes time. You massage the oil slowly, carefully, making sure it reaches the elbows, the heels, and the crooks of your knees. These are the spots where cracked skin can lead to painful infections. There's no neosporin here, just a mix of honey and prayer. And honey is expensive. You've seen people skip oiling to save time, and they always regret it. Sunburns are brutal, and they peel in the worst ways. Plus, without oil, you feel like you're being sandblasted every time the wind picks up. The oil also serves another peculiar function: bug repellent, sort of. It doesn't keep all the pests away, but it makes it harder for fleas and mosquitoes to land and stay. At night, some people even reapply it to keep their skin from drying out under rough linen blankets or open air. You've heard of people using crushed frankincense or cinnamon bark in their oils as natural repellents, though whether that works or just smells nice is anyone's guess. It's a weird feeling, this slick layer between your body and the world, but one you get used to. like sandals that never quite fit, or the sound of distant donkeys braying at sunrise. By the time you're done, your skin shines like sun-warmed bronze. You're ready now. Not clean exactly, but gleaming. And in this land of sun, sand, and status, that's close enough. With your skin now gleaming and your linen properly secured, it's time to deal with your hair. Or more accurately, the ancient Egyptian solution to hair. Get rid of it and fake the rest. In this climate, hygiene isn't just a matter of vanity, it's survival. The combination of heat, sweat, and dust creates a perfect recipe for lice, infections, and general unpleasantness. So, most people shave their heads. Men, women, even children. Smooth scalps are cooler, cleaner, and significantly less itchy. And if you're lucky, or pretending to be, you cover it all up with a wig. Wigs in ancient Egypt aren't made of synthetic fibers or shiny plastic. They're crafted from human hair, wool, or palm fibers, depending on your budget. The rich have luxurious braided pieces laced with beads and gold wire. Yours is less ambitious. It's stiff in all the wrong places, smells faintly of river reeds, and itches like a beetle parade. Still, it makes you look respectable, or at least presentable. You secure it with a crude leather strap and hope it stays on straight. Wigs are essential for public appearances and religious ceremonies, especially if you're heading to the temple. Not wearing one might be interpreted as disrespect or poverty, which, let's be honest, isn't inaccurate. At home, though, you're free to bare your shiny scalp and sigh in relief as a breeze passes over your head. Now comes the head cone. Yes, a cone. Of fat. Perfumed animal fat, to be precise. You place it delicately atop your wig, where it perches like a melting candle. Throughout the day, it slowly dissolves in the heat, releasing fragrance and dribbling down your hair like some kind of holy air freshener. The goal is to smell pleasant, ward off insects, and mark yourself as someone who cares about their appearance, or is at least trying. Historians still argue whether these cones were real daily wear or ceremonial representations seen in art alone. Some believe they were real, worn during feasts and festivals. Others suspect they're just symbolic, idealized accessories that wouldn't work in practical life. You're not sure. All you know is the one on your head is starting to slide a bit, and you can't tell if that's perfume or melted lamb fat in your ear canal. As for daily hygiene, water is life, and it's not wasted on full baths. You rinse with jugs, wipe down with linen cloths, and rub natron, Egypt's go-to cleansing salt, under your arms when it's available. There are no toothbrushes, but chew sticks from aromatic plants do a decent job of cleaning your teeth and giving you fresh enough breath to avoid offending a god. Nails are trimmed with small bronze blades. Body hair is scraped off with curved razors, waxed, or sometimes just plucked by hand, which is exactly as unpleasant as it sounds. Wealthy folks might have dedicated servants to handle all this. You have 5 minutes and a dull stone. By the end of the grooming process, you're hot, slippery, slightly itchy, and faintly fragrant. Congratulations, you're beautiful by 1300 BCE standards. Just try not to sweat too hard and ruin the wig before you've even left the house. As you adjust your stiff linen kilt and pat down the corners of your slightly askew wig, it's impossible not to notice how clothes and everything around them say far more than just, "I got dressed this morning." In ancient Egypt, your wardrobe is your resume, your family tree, and your net worth all in one. And unless you're nobility, yours probably says, "Can read, can dig, can't afford scented oils." Let's start with fabric. Everyone wears linen. It's the only textile widely produced in the region. But not all linen is created equal. The wealthier classes have linens that are bleached, fine, and often pleated. You've seen elite priests glide by in shimmering robes so delicate they look like they're wearing spun moonlight. Yours is thicker, coarser, and faded from too many washes in Nile water that's seen too many things. Then there's the fit. You wrap your kilt tightly, knot it at the waist, and hope it holds throughout the day. Higher status Egyptians, especially men, might wear kilts that are elaborately pleated, folded with geometric precision. Women of status wear sheath dresses with broad beaded collars, sometimes with a see-through overskirt that says, "Yes, I am impractical on purpose." These clothes take servants to help you put on. Yours takes 30 seconds and a prayer. Accessories make the difference clearer. You tie a string around your waist. They wear gold-stamped leather belts with pouches. You carry a wooden reed pen tucked behind your ear. They have servants to carry scrolls, inks, and writing boards. You might wear a small amulet carved from clay and rubbed with crushed lapis for good luck. They wear real lapis, carved by artisans, blessed by priests. And while you go barefoot, nobles strut around in sandals made from dyed leather, sometimes with toe loops or designs stamped into the sole. They don't have to walk far, so wearing something uncomfortable is no real obstacle. For laborers, sandals are optional luxury items. Most of your village just hopes not to step on sharp pottery shards or scorpions on their morning walk. Even hairstyle, or the absence of it, reveals your station. You shaved your head for hygiene. Wealthy folks shave theirs too, but wear wigs so complex they require storage racks. Some are curled and styled to look like the hairstyles of gods, with strands dyed black using coal. Wigs like that aren't just head coverings, they're mobile status announcements. One detail that stands out most is jewelry. For you, a carved shell or painted bead might be the height of fashion. For the rich, it's gold rings, faience necklaces, and inlaid arm cuffs. Amulets in the shape of scarabs, ankhs, and eyes of Horus are worn by all classes, but only the wealthy have theirs blessed in the temple or embedded with semi-precious stones. Yours, let's be honest, might just be a beetle that dried out nicely. And so, before a single word is spoken, people know who you are. Not by birth certificate, not by reputation, by how your linen falls, how your feet are dressed, and whether your scent says lotus blossom or recently carried onions. The clothes may be simple, but the message is not. In ancient Egypt, you wear your place in the world on your sleeve, assuming you're fortunate enough to have sleeves. Your feet hit the packed dirt path just as the sun hits the "why is it already this hot?" point in the sky. The morning commute in ancient Egypt is less of a stroll and more of a tactical negotiation between the elements, livestock, and your own patience. There are no paved roads in your village, just sun-baked tracks that turn to sticky muck during Nile flooding and back to cracked stone during the dry months. Either way, your sandals, if you're wearing them, offer less protection than a soggy napkin. You're not alone, of course. All around you, neighbors are shuffling off to their own daily grinds. Farmers leading stubborn oxen, potters carrying heavy baskets of clay, women balancing baskets of laundry or food on their heads with the kind of poise modern gymnasts would envy. There are kids darting between legs, donkeys pulling wooden carts, and chickens who seem to exist solely to be underfoot at the worst possible moment. The smell is layered. There's the earthy scent of dust, the sharp sting of manure, and a faint undercurrent of fish from the previous day's market. If you're lucky, a breeze might carry a whiff of someone cooking lentils, but mostly it's a potpourri of heat, sweat, and dung. You squint against the glare as the sun reflects off every flat surface, including your neighbor's highly polished bald head. Your pace is dictated by your load. If you're carrying tools, water jugs, or trade goods, you'll have to stop every so often to shift the weight. There are no carts for people like you. Those are for merchants or the very fortunate, and forget about a leisurely chat with friends. Everyone's too busy hauling, dodging, or trying not to twist an ankle in a surprise hole. Occasionally, someone zips past you on a donkey. Not galloping, more of a casual bounce that still feels like luxury. Donkeys are the pickup trucks of your world, and owning one is a sign of modest prosperity. You have your feet and a decent stride, and frankly, that's good enough to get where you're going, if you're not run off the road by a priest's entourage, sidewalks. Traffic signals? Dream on. The closest thing you get to pedestrian rules is a loud warning shout, usually just before someone nearly runs into you with a bundle of papyrus stalks. Navigating the morning commute takes focus, fast reflexes, and an acceptance that you will arrive at work dirty, sweaty, and mildly annoyed. And there are hazards, of course. Not just the literal dung piles or occasional collapsed roof tiles, but the human kind. A tax official you owe a favor to might be lingering by the village granary. A merchant you haggled a little too aggressively with last week could be glaring from under his stall canopy. And then there are the temple guards, stoic, watchful, and unlikely to find your excuses charming if you're caught stepping somewhere sacred without the proper sandals. Still, despite the chaos, there's rhythm here. The sound of sandals scraping the earth, the occasional jingle of copper anklets, the low, slow grumble of a cow who really didn't want to leave the house this morning. You walk on, dodging dung and disappointment alike, one sweaty step closer to whatever today has in store. You'd think the real dangers in ancient Egypt would be human, tax collectors, taskmasters, or priests with too many rules, but no. Nature has a different agenda for you today, the kind that slithers, snaps, and hisses as you walk the dusty trail toward your work site. The morning sun casts long shadows over clumps of reeds and half-buried stones, any one of which could be hiding something with fangs. Let's start with the obvious menace: crocodiles. The Nile might look calm and almost inviting if you squint and ignore the algae, but it hides beasts that have perfected the art of lurking. These aren't cartoon reptiles lounging under palm trees. These are cold-blooded opportunists that could, if you're unlucky and distracted, turn your water-fetching trip into a cautionary tale carved on a tomb wall. Everyone in the village knows someone who barely got away. Whether the story's true or not doesn't matter. You still scan the banks every time you pass the river, clutching your jug like a shield. Then there are the snakes. They love the same things you do: shade, warmth, and quiet corners. The problem is, they don't love you. Cobras, vipers, and other bitey wonders make their homes in storage jars, rock crevices, and sometimes your very own thatched roof. You learn early not to stick your hand into any dark space unless you've made a loud noise first. The phrase, "poking around here," is not just bad manners. It's a possible death sentence. Even the insects feel more malicious here. Mosquitoes swarm near any stagnant water, and since the Nile is full of such pools during the flood season, you're essentially wading through a buffet of bloodthirsty bugs. They buzz your ears, slip beneath your tunic, and bite anywhere linen doesn't cover. You've tried oiling your skin to keep them off, but let's be honest, most of them just see it as seasoning. And then there are scorpions. Those little nightmares can hide in your sandals, under your sleeping mat, even in your discarded cloak. Their sting won't always kill you, but it'll make you wish it had. The pain radiates like hot metal through your limb, and even the most generous temple physician will just wave incense over you and mutter a prayer. Effective. Well, historians still argue whether any of that worked, or if it was just for morale. Dogs roam in packs near the village edge, mostly harmless but occasionally territorial. They'll growl if you get too close to their scavenging spot. And if it's nightfall, jackals might be skulking nearby, silent, swift, and smarter than you'd think. You hope you don't have to walk home late again. That one time you heard a jackal scream, you didn't sleep for a week. Still, none of these creatures is unusual in your world. You're taught how to dodge them young. Never turn your back on the river, always shake your shoes, and keep a stick handy just in case. The wild is not some distant concept. It's a daily commute hazard, so you keep your head low, eyes sharp, steps cautious. Because in ancient Egypt, it's not just getting to work that's hard, it's getting there without becoming breakfast. You're nearly at your destination now, stomach grumbling, sandals caked with Nile silt, and you're probably thinking, surely the hardest part is over. But no, dear traveler, you've still got to survive one of the most dreaded figures in ancient Egypt. Not a crocodile, not a priest, but something far more insidious: the bureaucrat. There he stands at the checkpoint near the granary, stylus in one hand, a scowl on his face, and a blank clay tablet just waiting for someone to ruin his morning. You've seen his kind before. He's one of the scribes, educated, tidy, and absolutely certain that he is better than you. His wig is powdered, his kilt is suspiciously clean, and he hasn't done a day of manual labor in his life. But he controls everything: rations, work assignments, access to tools, and sometimes your very future. You approach cautiously. There's an unspoken rule: do not joke, do not yawn, and whatever you do not sneeze while he's counting grain. The man has a memory like a hawk and the tolerance of a sunburned hippopotamus. Name? He asks, even though you've worked here for weeks. You give it. He hums in a way that suggests suspicion. And who approved your assignment? You name a foreman. He scribbles something, his hand moving slowly, deliberately, as if each letter is a personal gift to the gods. Bureaucrats are everywhere in Egypt. They're the glue holding the entire kingdom together, or the sand in your shoes, depending on your perspective. Taxes, they track every bushel, labor quotas. They calculate your daily brick output. Sick days? Only if you're half dead and have a signed amulet from a priest. The state's power flows through these people like Nile water through irrigation channels. You don't want to make waves. Some bureaucrats are kinder, especially if you bring a bribe, a few figs, a chunk of cheese, maybe a favor involving your cousin's fishing boat. But this one looks like he hasn't smiled since the reign of Thutmose III. He's known for sending late arrivals to stone detail, the worst job, short of actually being entombed. He finishes his notes, gestures vaguely, and waves you on. You exhale quietly. One wrong word, and you'd be hauling sacks under the sun for 10 extra days. You'd complain, but remember, historians still debate whether these low-level scribes were merely civil servants or the secret middle managers of doom. Either way, they wield power with passive-aggressive grace. You pass others waiting in line behind you, shuffling awkwardly. A young man forgot his permit. A woman carrying papyrus reeds is asked to step aside. The bureaucrat barely moves, his expression unchanging, as if sculpted in limestone. You wonder if he dreams in hieroglyphs. What's worse is that you'll see him again tomorrow. Every day, this checkpoint stands like a silent test, reminding you that the pharaoh isn't the only one with control. Sometimes it's the guy with a stylus and a suspiciously smooth kilt. And just like that, your commute isn't quite over. Not until the red ink is dry and your name's on the list. Again. You continue walking, shoulders already warm under the sun, and you can't help but glance, just for a second, at the lucky few passing by with transportation that doesn't involve their own feet. Someone on a donkey breezes past, their linen robe barely fluttering in the breeze. Up ahead, a small group coasts along the river in a narrow wooden boat, shaded with palm fronds and loaded with amphorae. And just at the edge of the village path, there it is, a chariot. Shiny, well-maintained, pulled by two high-stepping horses that probably eat better than you do. You, of course, keep walking. In ancient Egypt, transport is more than just mobility. It's a status symbol. The average laborer like yourself walks everywhere, occasionally sharing a load with a donkey or, on rare days, managing to borrow a boat for work on the Nile. But actual ownership of a donkey, boat, or especially a chariot, that's reserved for the upper crust, the scribes, priests, noble families, and people who get their sandals repaired by someone else. Let's start with donkeys. They're the workhorses of the land, even though they aren't technically horses. They're stubborn, strong, and occasionally smarter than their owners. If your family owns one, it's your pride and joy. If you don't, you might rent one or hope your neighbor owes you a favor. Donkeys carry loads, pull carts, and sometimes transport children or elders, though they aren't known for being gentle riders. Ancient artwork even shows people hanging on for dear life as their donkey makes unhelpful decisions. Then there are riverboats, The Nile is the superhighway of Egypt. Most goods, people, and gossip travel by water. Small boats made from bundles of papyrus are common for short distances in fishing, while sturdier wooden boats are used for transporting heavy goods, grain, pottery, beer, statues of gods. If you're lucky enough to hitch a ride on one, you're spared the hot, dusty walk along the riverbanks. But space is limited, and unless you're paying, you'll likely be left waving from the shore as the boat glides by with the breeze. Now the elite? They use the chariots. Lightweight, two-wheeled marvels pulled by horses imported and trained at great expense. These are mostly for show, warfare, ceremonies, parades, or fast travel between estates. No one in your class rides a chariot to work unless you're dreaming or you've just been captured by the Hittites. Riding a chariot through a village sends a clear message. I have arrived, and I brought wheels. Historians still debate how common chariots were for everyday use, but one thing is certain: they weren't for hauling fish or commuting to a grain field. They were symbols of military power, divine favor, or obscene wealth. Just hearing the clatter of chariot wheels can silence a street. Children watch with wide eyes. You tighten your grip on your woven bag and try not to look too impressed. Even sandals can be transportation in this world, if they're sturdy enough. The best ones have turned up toes to keep dust out. Yours are flat, thin, and prone to flopping off at the worst moments. You envy those with good sandals like you envy people with roofs that don't leak. But there's a strange comfort in walking. You know the path. You know the people along the way. And you don't owe anyone a ride. Plus, when your sandals finally give out, you can always just walk barefoot. Your soles are tougher than they look. You've finally arrived at the fields. The commute is over. Your kilt is now sticking to you in 3 separate places, and the sun is perched high and angry over the Nile Valley. Welcome to your real day job, farming under a sun so persistent it could be worshipped, which in fact it is. Ra, the sun god, blesses your labor by personally roasting you alive for the next 10 hours. Your job is to tend to one of the countless fields near the river, growing staples like barley, emmer wheat, lentils, or flax. Farming is the beating heart of Egypt's economy, which sounds impressive until you realize that, as a farmer, you're a speck in the system. The pharaoh gets credit for the bounty, and the gods get credit for the Nile floods. You get blisters. The soil is rich, to be fair. When the Nile recedes after its annual inundation, it leaves behind dark, fertile earth, the gift of the gods, everyone says. It's your job to dig, plant, irrigate, weed, and harvest it. Digging's done with a hoe shaped like a question mark, and that's appropriate because by hour 3, you'll be questioning every decision that brought you to this moment. Your back is already sore by mid-morning. You take turns with your work crew, neighbors, friends, in-laws you pretend to like, using simple wooden tools to churn the soil. Some days you're barefoot in the mud, trying not to trip over a snake or disturb a scorpion's nap. Other days, you're on dry ground, chasing a stubborn ox who thinks your plow is a toy. No hats. No gloves, no breaks unless your overseer feels generous. You bring a cloth to cover your head and a water jug that warms to the temperature of soup before noon. Hydration is a gamble, too. Drink too much and you'll run out before lunch. Drink too little, and your co-workers might carry you home like a sack of onions. By midday, your skin is the color of the fields themselves, coated in dust and grime, with sweat tracing little rivers down your arms. You smell like earth, smoke, and whatever you stepped in on the way here. Occasionally, someone sings, a work chant, old and rhythmic to keep everyone moving. It helps, so do jokes. You learn to find humor in the misery. At least the flies are getting their exercise, someone mutters, waving a branch like it's a weapon of war. Even under these conditions, your work must be exact. You follow planting patterns that have been passed down for generations. Furrows must be straight, irrigation channels cleared. Mistakes mean less grain. Less grain means the tax collector comes calling. No one wants that. Historians still argue whether Egyptian farmers were respected or exploited. The truth is probably both. You are praised in prayers and poetry, but at the end of the day, you're still expected to do all the sweaty parts while someone else counts the harvest. And the sun, it never blinks, it just burns. As you bend over your furrowed row, carefully dropping seeds into the soil with the tired precision of someone who's done this 1,000 times, you're not just growing food, you're growing statistics. In ancient Egypt, your harvest doesn't belong solely to you. A hefty portion of it is already spoken for by the government. That's right, farming under the blazing sun is just the start. Next comes meeting your quota, a word that sounds small but weighs heavier than the ox you borrowed last week. Egypt's economy runs on grain. It's not just food, it's currency, taxes, wages, offerings, and offerings disguised as taxes. When the pharaoh's scribes come knocking, they're not interested in excuses about bad floods or rebellious donkeys. They want bushels, and they want them counted, logged, and hauled to the granaries in a timely fashion. Or else, your plot is part of a larger estate, most likely owned by a temple or a noble household. After each harvest, your produce is measured by official tallymen who show up with clay tablets, measuring tools, and the demeanor of people who'd fine a statue for being dusty. You watch as they pour your barley into standard jars, mark the quantity with styluses, and record it in a script you can't read. There's a lot of nodding and frowning. Sometimes they mutter, sometimes they argue, but you never interrupt. That's how people end up assigned to latrine duty. If your quota isn't met, penalties. They might demand extra labor during the next planting season, or they'll take from your family's winter reserves. The worst outcome is having your land reassigned to a more productive farmer, which is bureaucratic speak for someone who probably bribed the inspector. Losing land means losing status, food, and your place in the village. You don't let that happen, so you do the math constantly in your head. How many bushels per row? How many rows per day? How many more rows before your back gives out? Even your dreams start sounding like inventory lists. Your wife jokes that you talk in ratios while you sleep. You don't deny it. It's not just your harvest on the line. Temples demand offerings of grain and oil. Priests have quotas too. And if they're running low, guess who they come to? The tax collector. And guess who the tax collector comes to? You. Even your community festivals are based on the surplus. Celebrations when the quotas are met. Silent nods and skipped music when they're not. If there's no beer at this year's Feast of Opet, everyone knows someone didn't pull their weight, and everyone has a pretty good idea who that someone was. Historians still argue whether these systems were fair or simply efficient oppression. Some point to records showing that quotas were adjusted based on Nile floods. Others argue that any flexibility disappeared as soon as the scroll hit the vizier's desk. But down here in the dirt, you don't argue philosophy, you count grain. You pray for strong stalks and weak scribes, because one miscalculation, one late delivery, and your life becomes less about farming and more about apologizing. You'd think that farming would be easier with help from animals and tools, right? That's adorable. Ancient Egyptian tools are simple, functional, and about as ergonomic as a brick with a handle. As for oxen, well, they're strong, stubborn, and determined to teach you humility. Your main implement today is a wooden hoe, not a metal blade, mind you, just a sharpened bit of wood strapped to a longer stick. You use it to turn the soil in short, choppy motions. After about 15 minutes, your wrists start whispering mean things about your ancestors. By the end of an hour, your palms are red and puffy, and you're one splinter away from turning this into a medical drama. You try switching hands, but somehow both feel equally betrayed. Then there's the plow. If your field is big enough, or your overseer is feeling generous, you get to use one. It's a Y-shaped piece of wood you drag through the soil, ideally with an ox hitched to the front. Ideally. Your ox, however, has opinions. This beast, half saint, half toddler, does not move just because you say go. It requires coaxing, a gentle tug on the harness, and sometimes a firm smack on the haunches, followed by an apology when it looks at you with genuine offense. It walks when it feels like it, stops when it sees something edible, and occasionally turns around entirely because a fly buzzed past its ear. Its favorite activity is relieving itself exactly where you just planted seeds. Even with the ox cooperating, guiding the plow is no small task. It skips, it sticks, it bounces. One moment you're digging a beautiful straight trench, the next your furrow looks like it was drawn by a very drunk snake. Your overseer scowls, you pretend not to see him. The other tools are just as charming. Sewing baskets made from woven reeds hang awkwardly from your elbow. You scatter seeds with a flick of the wrist that always looks more elegant in temple carvings than in real life. When you weed, you do it by hand, crouched low, sweating bullets, praying not to grab a nettle or worse, a lurking insect with a bad attitude, and then come the blisters. Your hands swell and harden over time, but until they do, every tool feels like it was designed to insult your fingers personally. You wrap linen strips around your palms, but they soak through fast, leaving you with hot, damp bandages and a new appreciation for soft clay. The sun doesn't help either. It bakes your tools until holding them feels like gripping heated bronze. Still, these tools work. Kind of. They're the same designs that have fed generations. Your grandfather used them. His grandfather did too, and you'll pass them to your children, hopefully with slightly fewer cracks and slightly more muttered warnings. Because in the end, it's not just the grain that grows. It's the calluses, the complaints, and the quiet, grudging pride that somehow, despite the odds, you've coaxed life from the dust. You pause to rest under the shade of a palm tree, if you can call 3 fronds and a whisper of breeze shade, and your eyes drift toward the shimmering band of the Nile in the distance. It looks calm, generous, like a god lounging between naps. But every farmer in Egypt knows the truth. The river giveth, and the river most certainly taketh away. You live and die by its mood swings. The Nile flood, known as the inundation, arrives every year between June and September. In theory, it's the best thing that could happen to a farmer. When the river rises, it spills nutrient-rich silt over your fields, replenishing the soil and guaranteeing another year of harvest. It's the divine reset button, the thing that keeps the land from turning into a cracked husk of itself. But here's the catch. It has to be just right. Too low, and your fields won't get enough moisture or silt. Your yield will shrivel, and the taxman doesn't give discounts for drought. Too high, and the floods might wash away entire crops, erode canals, or drown your planting markers. You spend months gambling on a flood that could bless you or bury you. To monitor this divine water tantrum, Egyptian officials use something called a nilometer, a fancy word for a well with markings and a lot of nerves. These are built at temples and used by priests and bureaucrats alike to measure the height of the flood and predict its effects. The pharaoh's administrators calculate taxes based on those measurements. If the flood is high, you're assumed to be flush with grain. If it's low, they might still charge you full price, on the theory that Ra wouldn't do that to a faithful servant unless you were slacking off. You build tiny canals to catch and redirect water from the Nile, working with your neighbors in a chaotic ballet of digging, shouting, and mud fights, disguised as engineering. If your channel fails, if a wall cracks or someone forgets to close the gate, you could lose a season's worth of labor in one soggy afternoon. Historians still debate how precisely the state predicted flood behavior. Some believe they used celestial charts and careful observation. Others think the priests mostly guessed and hoped for the best, while muttering confident things like, "The ibis flew low today. It's a good sign." As a farmer, you don't have the luxury of astrology. You read the signs with your eyes and your hands. You feel the dampness in the ground, watch how the river curves, listen to the hum of frogs who always seem to know before anyone else when the water will rise. Some mornings, you swear you can smell the flood coming, and when it does come, there's awe. The land disappears beneath rippling brown currents. Houses along the riverbank are abandoned for higher ground. Children squeal. Elders pray. Everyone waits. And once the waters recede, you step into the mud with a mix of hope and dread. Because this year, maybe you'll have enough grain to feed your family and meet your quota, or maybe you'll have to sell your best sandals just to get through winter. The Nile is life. But it never lets you forget who's really in charge. Let's say by some twist of fate or blessed scribal talent, you've escaped the fields and landed a position at the temple. Not as a priest, mind you, but as a scribe. It sounds cushy at first. No oxen, no blisters, no wrestling with plows under a murderous sun. But then you step inside your reed mat office, sit on the floor, and realize this job is a different kind of torment. Welcome to the world of sand, scrolls, and spine pain. You begin each morning hunched over a low wooden board, knees crammed beneath it like a poorly assembled table. The light is natural, meaning either too dim or too blinding. You try to find a happy angle with the morning sun, but there's always a pillar in the way. Or worse, a drifting sandstorm sneaking in through the lattice window like a nosy ghost. Your tools are deceptively simple. Reed pens, pots of black and red ink, a palette, and a stack of papyrus sheets that someone higher ranking will yell at you for wasting. The pens are cut with care, shaped like small daggers, and they will stab your fingers if you get sloppy. The ink is made from soot or ochre mixed with water and gum, fine when fresh, but clumpy when neglected. You begin to write. Slowly, carefully. Each hieroglyph has to be precise, even the ones that look like a tiny owl doing yoga. One mistake, and the whole line must be redone. There's no erasing, only scraping the papyrus with a shell shard and hoping no one notices. You dip, scratch, dab, repeat, for hours. Outside, the wind picks up. Sand begins to dance across the floor like cursed confetti. You press your hand over the page to protect your work, but grains still sneak in under your fingers, scratching the surface and smudging your lines. Sandstorms don't knock. They drift, swirl, and settle right in your ink pots like they own the place. Meanwhile, your back is staging a protest. There are no desks, no ergonomic chairs, just mats and the occasional cushion. You twist and stretch and curse softly under your breath, hoping the head scribe doesn't hear. The worst part? You'll be expected to copy the same hymn or tax record dozens of times before lunch. Over and over, with flair. Still, the work is sacred. You're recording rituals, laws, stories, and accounting records. Each hieroglyph a whisper from the gods, or more likely, a note about fish rations. And yes, sometimes you get to work on scrolls meant for the afterlife. That's where things get weird. Spells, instructions for navigating the duat, and very specific guidelines about talking to crocodile-headed judges. Historians still argue how widespread literacy really was among scribes. Some believe most could read but not write fluently, or specialize in only certain kinds of texts. You don't have time for that debate. You're too busy cleaning sand out of your palette and stretching your legs before the afternoon scroll marathon. Because here in the temple, the pen may be mightier than the plow, but it still gives you a cramp. Being a scribe might keep you out of the sun, but it doesn't mean you're safe from the pecking order. Inside these temple walls, everything runs on hierarchy. Who stands where, who eats when, who gets the fresh ink, and who scrapes the dry pot clean. It's a place of solemn rituals and carefully measured respect, but also quiet hazing, whispered politics, and the kind of status games that would make a royal court look like a friendly neighborhood potluck. You start at the bottom, always. You're not allowed to sit close to the altar or even touch sacred items without someone older watching like a hawk. Your assigned duties are the spiritual equivalent of janitorial work, dusting statues with goose feathers, sweeping sand from the shrine steps, organizing scrolls by a system no one explains. The moment you ask a question, someone half smiles and tells you to go consult Thoth, which is polite temple speak for figure it out or suffer. And then there are the priests, dozens of them, each with a rank, title, and deeply cultivated beard, if they're male, or hairless shine if they're fulfilling purity roles. You learn their moods quickly. One likes his scrolls arranged by the width of the reed. Another insists his ink be fanned dry with a specific palm frond. Still another communicates exclusively through cryptic eyebrow twitches. You try not to take it personally when they send you to fetch non-existent items like sunlight in a jar or Osiris's breakfast tray. It's part of the test. Pass it, and you move up. Fail, and you'll be sorting broken amulets for the rest of your career. Meals are another hierarchy minefield. You eat last, if there's anything left. The senior scribes get the good bread and the soft cheese. You get the crusts and a lecture about humility. Someone always gets assigned to fetch water. It's always you. Even your writing duties are dictated by status. Beginners copy standard prayers or update inventory lists dozens of times, all by hand. More senior scribes get the real jobs: royal decrees, land records, birth registries, and copies of the Book of the Dead. You'll spend weeks just practicing how to draw a flawless lotus or a particularly smug-looking ibis. When your supervisor checks your work, you brace for the sigh, the eyebrow raise, and the inevitable start over. There's also a kind of invisible currency here: knowledge. The older scribes have seen things: rituals held at midnight, offerings made behind locked doors, conversations between high priests and government officials. If you're lucky, you'll catch whispers. If you're smart, you'll stay quiet about them. Historians still debate how rigid temple hierarchies were. Some believe younger scribes rose quickly through the ranks. Others argue that most spent years stuck in the same dusty corner, writing the same festival schedule over and over. From where you're sitting, cramped legs, ink-stained fingers, it feels like the latter, but you keep showing up. You bow low, you sweep well, you memorize every complaint about scroll storage. Because someday, if you survive the hierarchy without accidentally misquoting a god, you might rise high enough to have your own apprentice, who you can send to fetch Ra's spare sandals. If you thought temple life would bring you feasts and incense-scented serenity, think again. Welcome to a world where eating garlic is a punishable offense. Fish is spiritually off-limits, and every action, down to how you wash your hands, is dictated by ritual. Temple service may offer shelter and scrolls, but it also serves a generous helping of rules, and every bite you take is scrutinized like it's being judged by the gods themselves. Because in a way it is. Let's start with food. While laborers might snack on roasted fish or stew full of garlic and leeks, you, aspiring temple scribe and occasional altar sweeper, are forbidden from such delights. Garlic especially is a big no-no. It's considered impure, too pungent for proximity to the divine. So are onions. You can't even eat them in private and hope to get away with it. The smell sticks, and your fellow scribes will notice. Then comes the shunning. And maybe the silent eyebrow of doom from a high priest. Fish is another tricky one. Though it's a staple for most Egyptians, certain temples, especially those devoted to Osiris, strictly ban it. The lore says that a fish once devoured a piece of the god during his dismemberment. That story doesn't do much for your appetite, but it certainly keeps fish off the temple menu. You'll have to settle for lentils, dates, barley cakes, and the occasional fig, assuming someone in the kitchen isn't hoarding them again. Every day begins with purification, and not the quick splash-your-face-and-go kind. You're expected to bathe before entering the sacred areas, sometimes multiple times a day. Water is poured over your hands and feet in carefully prescribed sequences. You chant under your breath, reciting lines about cleansing both body and spirit, and then dry off with linens that must also be pure. If a cat sneezes on them, guess what? Start over. Even entering the shrine areas requires ritual steps. You must wear white linen, freshly laundered. You must walk in silence. You must never, never look the statue of the god directly in the eyes during certain ceremonies. One new acolyte did once. He got demoted to scroll copying duty for a full year. That's a lot of ibis hieroglyphs. When offering food to the gods, you don't just drop off a tray and call it a day. You present each item with specific words, bowing at the right angle, using the correct hand. Offerings are symbolic: bread, meat, fruits, and incense, arranged like art. The gods don't eat them physically, of course, but spiritually it's believed they absorb the essence. Afterward, the leftovers are shared among temple staff, but only if you've done everything properly. If not, no sacred snack for you. Historians still argue whether all these food taboos and rituals were strictly enforced, or if some scribes got away with sneaky garlic feasts behind the scroll racks. Your stomach hopes it's the latter, but your nose, and everyone else's, isn't so easy to fool. So you nibble your bland barley bread and pretend not to miss salt. You recite your cleansing prayers and try to ignore the grumbling in your gut, because in this sacred space, what you don't eat is just as important as what you write. By late afternoon, your stomach is softly protesting the lack of forbidden foods, and your knees are cracking every time you kneel. But temple work doesn't slow down. Now it's time for offerings, an ancient art form where devotion meets logistics, and where getting a fruit tray slightly off-center might earn you a disapproving grunt from someone who hasn't smiled since Ramses III was in diapers. Offerings are everything here. They're the temple's heartbeat, performed multiple times a day in front of statues that represent gods, spirits, and deified ancestors. You're not the officiant, of course. That honor goes to a higher-ranking priest, someone who never seems to sweat and smells faintly of imported incense. But you're there for the prep work, always. You gather the items, loaves of bread shaped like tiny pyramids, dried fish, assuming the god allows it, cucumbers, dates, beer, and cuts of meat arranged on small platters. Everything is laid out with geometric precision. You wipe each item clean of dust using a fine linen cloth, because apparently the gods, despite living in golden sanctuaries, have very low dust tolerance. Even the trays are polished to a dull shine, reflecting flickering torchlight in ways that somehow make your blisters feel religious. Then you carry the offerings into the sanctuary. You walk slowly, deliberately, because if you trip or drop something, especially something like a roasted quail, you're going to become the punchline of temple gossip for weeks. Once inside, the air grows heavy. Scented smoke curls around columns. The statue of the god looms tall, watching, or at least it feels like it's watching. You place the offerings with trembling fingers, whispering the words your mentor drilled into you. "O Divine One, may your face be filled with satisfaction," and so on, while silently praying that no beetle has crawled into the date bowl. Then back to the storeroom, your second home. The scrolls await. The temple library isn't exactly the Library of Alexandria, but it might be just as dusty. Papyrus scrolls are stored in reed chests, labeled with colored twine and symbols only the senior scribes seem to interpret correctly. Your task is to inventory them, reorganize them when needed, and most importantly, not sneeze on them. Papyrus doesn't like moisture. Neither does your supervisor. Reading the scrolls is both enlightening and maddening. You copy daily records: who offered what, which priest led the sunrise hymn, how many loaves went missing. But then there are the hymns, the sacred texts, the ceremonial instructions detailing exactly how to swing an incense burner without offending Hathor. You wonder if the gods really care about the angle of your wrist, or if some long-dead perfectionist just wrote it that way to impress their supervisor. Historians still debate whether temple scribes believed every word or just followed orders. Some scrolls include little doodles, eyes, boats, the occasional cat, which suggests even the most devoted among you found moments of mischief. You've secretly added a lotus flower or two when no one was looking. It's your quiet rebellion. As the sun lowers, you seal the offering room and dust the last scroll chest. You exhale, weary but intact. You've fed the gods, guarded the sacred knowledge, and dodged another day of sandstorms and sandal politics. Now, if only someone would offer you a meal tray and a nice bath. You wouldn't expect it. But in ancient Egypt, beauty is serious business, and also a mild health hazard. As you sit at home in the glow of a clay lamp, reaching for your coal pot and a carefully shaped bone applicator, you realize you're about to smear finely ground minerals around your eyes in the name of fashion, faith, and maybe fending off evil spirits. It's a bold move for someone who hasn't had lunch yet. Let's begin with the centerpiece of Egyptian cosmetics, kohl eyeliner. It's iconic. Men, women, children, even statues wear it. The dark line drawn around the eye isn't just aesthetic. It's practical, sort of, and spiritual, definitely. In a land where sunlight reflects off sand like it's trying to blind you personally, kohl reduces glare, just like modern athletes might use black grease under their eyes. At least that's the idea. You dip your stick into a mixture of powdered galena, basically lead ore, and animal fat or oil. Then, with practiced hands, you drag the black line across your eyelids, hoping your hands are steady and that your baby sibling doesn't tackle you mid-swipe. If you're fancy, you might use green malachite instead, especially for upper lids, but that's a bit extra. Also, your eye might burn for a while. That's normal, probably. Lead, of course, is toxic, but nobody knows that yet. In fact, many Egyptians believe kohl protects you from infections and wards off evil spirits like the evil eye. Historians today are torn. Some say the lead compounds may have had mild antimicrobial effects in small doses. Others just call it incredibly dangerous makeup with good PR. You don't stop with eyes. Rouge is made from red ochre ground into powder and mixed with animal fat or water. It goes on your cheeks, lips, even your fingertips. A dusty blush that says, "I may not have eaten today, but I am glowing." There's also a yellow version, used more rarely, that gives your skin a golden sheen, perfect for special ceremonies, or when you just want to confuse your neighbors. And let's not forget perfume. Fragrance isn't sprayed, it's smeared. Perfumed oils made from myrrh, lotus, or cinnamon bark are dabbed behind ears and across the chest. These are expensive luxuries, so most folks make do with scented fat cones that melt slowly over the scalp. You remember the time your cousin's cone slipped off mid-feast and landed in someone's lentils? Social disaster. Mirror time is limited. Polished copper sheets act as your reflection device. They're a little warped, a little oxidized, but they get the job done. You lean close, squinting to check your lines, dabbing at the places where your kohl has betrayed you. Makeup in ancient Egypt isn't just vanity, it's identity, protection, ritual, and social class, all in one smeared package. Everyone wears it, from pharaoh to fisherman. The quality varies, but the message doesn't. I'm alive, I'm sacred, and I have access to powdered rock. Historians still argue whether cosmetics were used daily or only on special occasions. You don't have time to ponder it. You've got to fix your eyeliner before temple service, and maybe find some mint to chew, because while your eyes look great, your breath smells like yesterday's onions. In the ever-shiny world of ancient Egyptian beauty, there's one unspoken rule. Body hair is not invited. Smoothness is in. From your scalp to your ankles, the goal is to look like you've been polished by a team of divine spa workers. And if you can't afford divine spa workers, well, it's up to your steady hands, stone razors, and tolerance for mild to severe discomfort. Hair removal isn't optional, it's expected. Men and women alike go to great lengths, or rather, short lengths, to strip away anything that might collect dust, sweat, or spiritual impurity. You start your day with a quick inspection. Underarms, legs, chest, if applicable. A stray patch of fuzz is not just a grooming oversight. It's a reputational risk. Imagine showing up to a festival with unshaved arms. You'd be the talk of the oil market for weeks. The tools? Brutal by today's standards. The most common implement is a sharpened flint or bronze razor, often curved to glide across skin. In theory. In practice, it's like dragging a tiny dagger along your thigh while praying you don't sneeze. You wet the area with warm water, possibly scented with crushed lotus petals if you're feeling fancy, and then go to work, gritting your teeth the whole time. Then there's beeswax waxing. Heated wax made from beeswax and tree resin is smeared onto the skin and ripped off with linen strips. Sound painful? It is. You once tried it on your arms and spent the next hour swearing like a sailor possessed by a desert spirit. But the result? Smooth, hairless skin and mild trauma. Sometimes tweezers are used. Made from metal or carved wood, they're for detailed jobs, eyebrows, chin, or those sneaky little ankle hairs that somehow glow in the sun like miniature beacons of shame. One of your aunts has a pair she guards like treasure. She once traded a whole string of dried fish to get them. Once you're as smooth as your resources allow, it's time for perfumes. And no, you don't just dab something behind your ears and call it a day. Fragrance is a full-body commitment. You begin with oils, rich and aromatic, often infused with ingredients like myrrh, cinnamon bark, frankincense, or crushed lotus petals. The oils are stored in small alabaster or ceramic jars, sealed with beeswax, and sometimes adorned with painted designs that scream, "This is not for your brother to steal." Perfumed cones of fat are the gold standard. You perch one atop your wig or bald scalp, and as the day progresses, and the sun does its solar oven thing, it slowly melts, releasing fragrant oils down your neck and shoulders. Romantic? Maybe. Messy? Absolutely. You've seen melted cones ruin tunics, stain scrolls, and even attract bees. But when it works, you walk into a room smelling like a garden the gods would lounge in. Historians still puzzle over whether these cones were daily wear or ceremonial. Temple art shows them prominently, but few physical examples remain. Either way, you've worn one during a festival, and while your scalp felt like a well-basted roast chicken by nightfall, at least you smelled amazing. In ancient Egypt, beauty isn't just skin deep. It's skin smooth, hairless, and infused with enough perfume to distract an angry crocodile. And you've mastered the art. Just don't sit too close to the fire with that head cone on. There's hot, and then there's ancient Egyptian noon sun melting your soul hot, with the sun glaring down like it's auditioning for the role of Ra himself. Protecting your skin isn't just a comfort, it's a survival tactic. And let's just say that ancient Egyptian sunscreen methods are creative. At the top of that highly questionable list, crocodile dung, yes. You read that right. This charming substance was part of certain skincare and medicinal practices used by some Egyptians, particularly in magical or medicinal recipes meant to protect the body from harmful forces, including, theoretically, the sun's blistering rays. The logic: if crocodiles can survive basking on riverbanks all day, perhaps their waste holds some mystical SPF properties. Or maybe someone just had a grudge against comfort. Either way, you scoop a little into a bowl, mix it with honey or oil, and apply it like the world's worst face mask. To be fair, it's not the go-to for everyone. More common protective measures include thick layers of oil, which act as a kind of barrier between your skin and the relentless sun. Castor oil, moringa oil, or animal fats are popular choices. You slather them on generously, knowing full well that dust will stick to it instantly. Congratulations. You're now an unwilling human sugar cookie. But the oils do help. They seal in moisture, keep the skin pliable, and might even have mild antibacterial properties. Plus, they make your muscles shine in that sculptural, godlike way that looks fantastic in statues. You've heard people joke that everyone in Egypt walks around looking like a living bronze carving by noon. For the especially cautious or especially paranoid, a thin layer of clay might be applied to exposed areas, offering both sun protection and bug resistance. It dries quickly and flakes off in the most inconvenient places, like your elbow crease, but it does keep the skin cool for a little while. Just don't smile too hard, or your face might crack. Some herbal pastes are used too. Infusions of frankincense, myrrh, and lotus, sometimes mixed with natron. These not only smell better than crocodile dung, but offer symbolic protection as well. Everything in Egypt has a spiritual layer. Oils dedicated to Hathor for beauty, natron associated with purification, perfumes linked to the divine breath of the gods. Even your sunscreen has a theological footnote, and while it's easy to poke fun at the dung lotion, let's not forget, in a world with no sunglasses, no wide-brimmed hats, and no refrigerated aloe vera, people used whatever they could find. Desperate times call for inventive measures. Historians still argue whether these sun-protective practices were widespread or reserved for ceremonial use. Some ancient texts mention ingredients like crocodile dung as part of healing balms or fertility treatments, while others suggest their use was tied more to magic than to dermatology. But when you're out in the fields for hours, sweating like a steamed date, you're not splitting hairs. You just want something, anything, to stop your nose from turning into a flaky red beacon. So you endure the heat, the shine, and yes, even the smell. Because in this land of unforgiving brightness, beauty might be pain, but sunburn is worse. You may think the ancient world would be more relaxed about appearance, given that everyone is sweaty, dusty, and living without mirrors that actually show your pores. But no, ancient Egypt is obsessed with beauty, and not just the kind you apply with a bit of ochre and oil. We're talking full scale, every detail counts, social pressure masquerading as religious duty type of obsession. Welcome to a culture where looking divine isn't just a compliment, it's an expectation. Start with the basics. Cleanliness equals holiness. You've heard it 1,000 times. Temples declare it. Priests preach it. Families enforce it like a domestic commandment. If you show up to a festival smelling like river mud and fermented beans, people will notice. Your neighbors might say nothing aloud, but the nose wrinkles speak volumes. Even among working-class Egyptians, there's an expectation to stay presentable. That means clean linen, oiled skin, neat hair, or at least a well-maintained bald head, and no visible grime unless you're currently digging a canal. And even then, rinse before supper. Then come the real beauty standards. For both men and women, youthfulness is prized. Smooth skin, slim figures, and soft features are regularly praised in literature and tomb inscriptions. You've seen statues of queens and nobles, ageless, symmetrical, always with that half-smile of serene perfection. Real life doesn't quite match, of course. You have calluses, sunspots, and a mosquito bite that refuses to go away. But still, the pressure to appear youthful lingers in every social interaction. Cosmetics are not a luxury item. They're a social obligation. Kohl-lined eyes aren't just fashionable. They're seen as signs of health, protection, and spiritual awareness. If your eyeliner's crooked, it implies you're careless. If it's missing altogether, unthinkable. People might assume you're ill, or worse, unclean. Jewelry plays a part, too. Scarabs, ankhs, faience beads. They're protective amulets, yes, but also fashion statements. Not wearing any can make you look poor, or worse, unblessed. You once forgot your necklace during a temple procession and spent the entire event fielding side eyes and not-so-subtle questions like, did you lose something, or are you just feeling spiritually vulnerable today? Even body scent is scrutinized. The poor do their best with scented oils and herbal rinses. The wealthy practically bathe in perfume. You once passed a noblewoman whose scent trail lingered like a second conversation, mingling notes of lotus, cinnamon, and probable smugness. Your own smell, after an honest day's work, is more humid flax and regret. And here's the wild part. All of this applies to men and women equally. Male beauty matters. You're expected to be neat, groomed, muscled, but not too bulky, and preferably tanned in a way that says, I labor, but aesthetically. You oil your skin not just for protection, but to gleam. A well-oiled chest is a status symbol. An ashy elbow is a social crime. Historians still debate whether these standards were enforced across all classes or mostly aspirational. But from where you sit, balancing a mirror shard in one hand and a crushed lotus in the other, you feel the weight of it. Looking good isn't just about vanity. It's about being taken seriously, spiritually, and socially. It's about being seen as someone who respects the gods, the community, and themselves. So you dab on more perfume, straighten your kilt, and apply that eyeliner with surgeon-level precision. Because even in a land ruled by gods and pharaohs, a crooked eyeline is what people will talk about. So you're not feeling your best. Maybe your head's throbbing, or your stomach has decided it wants to rebel against last night's lentil stew. Time to see the local healer, or maybe your grandmother, who seems to know every plant in the region, and half a dozen chants to go with them. Welcome to the world of ancient Egyptian medicine, where remedies range from the oddly logical to the profoundly questionable. You sit down, and the healer gives you a look that says, I've seen worse, which is not exactly comforting. She checks your pulse, not with fingers, but by asking when you last ate, how many times you've urinated, and whether your dreams have included crocodiles. Then she starts mixing up a concoction that smells like someone stirred a garden into a pot with old laundry water. First up, moldy bread. Yes, that's right. Ancient Egyptians used moldy bread on wounds, and in a twist of historical irony, they were accidentally onto something. Penicillin-like compounds can grow in the mold. She slaps a paste of it onto your scraped knee, and while it stings a little, it's not the worst thing she'll apply today. Next comes honey, generously spooned into a wooden bowl and mixed with crushed herbs, like thyme or cumin. Honey has antibacterial properties, which she knows from experience rather than scientific journals. It goes on burns, cuts, and insect bites. Also your throat, if you're coughing, in which case it's stirred with warm beer and a dash of powdered sycamore bark. You drink it and immediately regret asking for help. For fevers, she gives you a mixture of date wine and mashed garlic, followed by a linen wrap soaked in Nile water. You're told to lie still until the gods intervene, or until you stop smelling like an herbal salad. Other ailments call for more adventurous ingredients. Have a stomachache. Try a potion of crushed fly wings, fermented barley, and dried goose fat. Toothache? Chew on a piece of leather soaked in frankincense. You'd laugh if your molars didn't currently feel like they were hosting a war. Constipation. There's a cure for that too, though you might wish there weren't. A small enema made with warm milk and mashed dates, administered using a slender reed tube. You're suddenly grateful your stomach is behaving. For now. Not all remedies are ingested. Some are worn. You might be given an amulet shaped like the Eye of Horus, soaked in oil and tied around your neck to draw out the bad air. If you're unlucky, a live frog might be tied briefly to your chest to absorb the sickness. The frog is usually released afterward, assuming it doesn't leap away mid-procedure, croaking in protest. Historians still debate how effective these treatments were. Some clearly had merit. Honey, garlic, and certain clays have known healing properties. Others were likely more placebo than panacea. But in ancient Egypt, healing wasn't just about biology. It was about balance, both physical and spiritual. The goal was to realign your body, your soul, and your standing with the gods. So you drink the potion, rub on the salve, tie on the amulet, and lie down. Healing might take time, but hey, at least you've avoided the frog this time. You're lying flat on your mat, still tasting the aftershock of honey, garlic, and possibly ground lizard tail when your healer returns, not with another paste or potion, but with something even more powerful in the ancient Egyptian toolkit: a spell. Because here, medicine isn't complete without magic. And that headache might not be from bad beer. It could be from a wandering demon who mistook your skull for a vacation rental. Magical healing in ancient Egypt isn't a fringe idea. It's a central part of the practice. Every ailment has both a physical cause and a spiritual one. You might have a fever, but it's not just from sun exposure. Maybe a ghost brushed past you. Maybe you insulted a minor god. Maybe a curse someone muttered last week finally stuck. Whatever the root cause, someone needs to talk to the gods about it, and that someone is your healer. She begins by lighting incense, frankincense, or myrrh, depending on the severity of the case. The smoke curls up and drifts across your sweaty brow as she pulls out a scroll of well-worn incantations. She doesn't read it aloud like a book. No, she chants, a low, rhythmic, almost sing-song pattern that rises and falls like a lullaby mixed with a warning. The words are ancient, passed down through priest-healers for generations. Some invoke Thoth, god of wisdom and writing. Others call on Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of healing and destruction, who, to be fair, has a bit of a temper. The chant might begin with a diagnosis. There is pain in the head because the demon of drought has taken residence. Then comes the expulsion. Begone, foul breath of the underworld. Be cast into the red land and forgotten. You're instructed to repeat after her, if you can speak. If not, she might press an amulet into your hand and chant on your behalf. The amulet could be a Djed pillar for strength, an eye of Horus for protection, or even a small clay statue of a deity. These items are placed on or near the afflicted body part while she recites more spells, just loud enough to scare off the invisible forces, but not loud enough to wake the baby next door. The rituals grow more elaborate depending on how serious your illness is. Some involve drawing protective circles around your mat with chalk or crushed barley. Others include pouring water over your limbs while reciting spells of purification. This water is from the flood of Nun. It flows to banish evil. It flows to restore balance. You squirm as cold water dribbles down your side, but you say nothing. The demon, after all, is listening. Not every healer is a priest, but many learn temple chants through oral tradition or family lineage. You've heard of some who carry miniature statues of Bes, the protective dwarf god, to ward off illness with a cheerful grimace and tiny tambourine. These rituals might seem theatrical, but they carry deep belief and sometimes surprising results. Historians still debate how much people believed in the power of these incantations versus the herbs and poultices. But in your village, when the body fails, people turn first to the spiritual realm. Because healing, like illness, is rarely just one thing, so you lie still as the chants swirl around you, half asleep, half listening, and somehow you feel lighter. Whether it's the spell, the warm oil, or just finally lying down without someone asking you to fetch water, you can't say. But for now, the pain eases, and maybe, just maybe, the demon is packing its bags. So, you've survived the spells, the garlic potions, and the demon eviction rituals, but your molar still feels like it's hosting a thunderstorm. You've tried chewing on cinnamon bark, rinsing with beer, and biting down on leather soaked in frankincense. Nothing works. And now the healer is giving you that look, the one that says, well, there's always the sharp option. Yes, welcome to the extremely hands-on world of early Egyptian surgery. Despite the limitations of their era, the Egyptians weren't strangers to surgical procedures. They had tools, bronze scalpels, forceps, needles, even cautery irons. And while their understanding of infection and internal anatomy wasn't exactly modern, they knew how to stitch a wound, drain an abscess, and, when absolutely necessary, yank out a decaying tooth with alarming enthusiasm. You recline on a woven mat in the corner of the healer's house, staring at a ceiling that's seen too many unfortunate things. The healer sharpens a small bronze hook on a rock. Yes, a rock, and dips it in honey, which is both antiseptic and a convenient excuse to say, "This won't hurt as much." It will. There's no anesthesia in the modern sense. No numbing gel, no blessed gas. If you're lucky, she'll hand you a stick to bite down on and suggest drinking a bit of very strong, very warm beer beforehand. You do. You regret it immediately, but you're too committed now to back out. For tooth extractions, the method is simple. Grip it with tongs and pull, or wiggle. Or in one horrifying memory you're already suppressing, wedge it out with a curved blade. Success is measured in how few pieces the tooth breaks into. You groan, your vision blurs, and somewhere in the distance a goat sneezes. It's the most surreal dental experience of your life, and probably your last, since you'll now chew on the other side of your mouth for eternity. But that's nothing compared to draining abscesses. If you've got a swelling, say, under your arm or behind your ear, be prepared for hot blades, a lot of squeezing, and prayers to Imhotep, the deified architect turned healing god. The procedure goes something like this. Wash the area with beer or vinegar, heat a bronze knife over the fire, and make a swift incision. Then, apply pressure, catch whatever emerges in a palm leaf, and seal it with crushed resin and linen. Surgical treatment of injuries, especially those from accidents or combat, was practical. They stitched wounds using flax thread, bandaged them with honey-soaked linen, and sometimes splinted broken bones using wood slats and padded cloth. It's crude, but not random. Many ancient Egyptian texts, like the famous Eber's Papyrus, detail surprisingly specific treatments, including signs to look for and conditions considered untreatable, such as spinal fractures and full-body crocodile bites. Historians still argue over how widespread surgery really was. Some claim it was mostly for the wealthy or temple personnel. Others believe village healers often performed minor operations with astonishing frequency. Based on your experience, they're not rare enough. Afterward, you lie dazed and sweating, a linen pad pressed to your jaw, wondering whether the pain has truly stopped or if your brain just gave up. The healer pats your shoulder. You made it. She pours you another warm beer and offers a date soaked in honey, as if that'll make up for what just happened. You nod. Because chewing is no longer on the agenda, but hey, the tooth's gone, probably. Somewhere. As you sit nursing your jaw with a linen compress soaked in what smells suspiciously like old onions and hope, you begin to wonder, did any of that actually help? The bread mold, the chants, the honey, the heated knives. It's a fair question, and one that, 3,000 years later, historians are still arguing about. On one hand, ancient Egyptian medicine was remarkably advanced for its time. They had specialized healers, extensive medical texts, and treatment methods that included wound care, diagnostics, surgery, and even dental work. Papyrus scrolls like the Eber's Papyrus and the Edwin Smith Papyrus outline dozens of ailments and treatments. The detail is impressive. If thou examinest a man with a wound to the jaw and pus is flowing, you get the idea. On the other hand, for every documented remedy involving honey or herbs with proven antibacterial effects, there's a recommendation to apply crushed lizard bones and chant the name of Sekhmet 3 times before sunrise. Science and superstition were tangled like two snakes in a jar, and separating them is still a challenge for modern scholars. Some historians point to the success of certain ingredients. Honey, definitely antibacterial. Garlic, great for circulation, willow bark, a primitive aspirin. And let's not forget the use of castor oil for digestion and moldy bread as a primitive antibiotic, both surprisingly effective. The problem wasn't always the ingredients. It was the delivery. Dosages were inconsistent, and side effects were rarely documented unless they were particularly dramatic. i.e., the patient exploded into boils or fainted into the grain bin. Then there's the spiritual side of healing. Modern readers might roll their eyes at spells invoking bears to chase off the demon that clutches the liver, but these rituals served an emotional function. They gave patients hope, made them feel seen, and reassured them that someone, divine or not, was on their side. In a society where so much was dictated by the gods and fate, the act of chanting or wearing a protective amulet wasn't just custom, it was comfort. Some scholars argue that the psychological effect of these rituals played a big role in recovery. Modern medicine calls it the placebo effect. The ancients might have just called it alignment with Maat, the balance of the universe. If your soul, spirit, and spleen were all in harmony, you had a better shot at survival. Critics, of course, focus on the less flattering aspects. Dangerous surgeries performed without anesthesia, toxic lead-based cosmetics, and the occasional use of animal dung in places no dung should ever be. There were absolutely times when the cure was worse than the curse. But then again, that still happens now. Just ask anyone who's tried experimental herbal detox tea. So, where does that leave us? Somewhere between admiration and alarm. The truth is, ancient Egyptian medicine was a blend, a fusion of trial and error, natural observation, oral tradition, spiritual belief, and a fair dose of improvisation. They didn't always understand the why, but they paid close attention to the what. Sometimes that was enough. As you pull your linen bandage tighter and lie back on your straw mat, you're not sure if the pain in your jaw is fading or if you're just too tired to care. Either way, the ritual is done, the remedy has been applied, and the scrolls have been closed. Now you wait. And maybe, just maybe, it works. It's a quiet morning in the village until it isn't. A shout pierces the air, followed by a crash and a flurry of sandal slaps on baked earth. Someone's been accused of theft. Not a violent heist or jewel robbery. No, this time it's something even more serious. A missing loaf of bread. And in ancient Egypt, that's no small matter. You edge closer to the commotion, trying to look curious but not involved. The accused is a teenage boy, calloused hands, dust-streaked face, trembling just slightly. The accuser, a bread seller with arms folded tighter than a mummy wrap and a face like storm clouds over Memphis. Her eyes are laser-focused, and she's already calling for the local official, the equivalent of a neighborhood judge with a strong stick and a short fuse. Now, you might think accusations here are handled casually. They're not. Theft, even petty theft, isn't just a crime. It's a spiritual imbalance, a disruption of Ma'at, the cosmic order. And the process of accusation reflects that tension. It's part courtroom drama, part ritual theater, and 100% public spectacle. First comes the confrontation, right out in the open. The accuser lays out their case. He was near my basket. I turned for a moment. The bread was gone, and now his cheeks are full. The crowd murmurs. The accused denies it, of course, swearing by all the gods from Anubis to that weird one with the baboon head. It wasn't me! Ask anyone! I was helping my uncle grind grain! Next comes the ritual denial, sometimes dramatic, always desperate. The accused might swear an oath before a household idol or a protective amulet. They might draw a protective circle in the dust with a reed and stand inside it while proclaiming their innocence. In more serious cases, the local scribe is called to record the incident, and a scribe's involvement makes everything feel very, very real. Now comes the drama. Some villages still use the truth ritual, a form of trial by divine proxy. The accused might be asked to hold a sacred item, like a statue of Ma'at or an image of Thoth, and swear that they're innocent. If they're lying, it's believed the gods will punish them. Maybe not today, but soon. A sudden cough, a trip over a goat, a nosebleed. All might be interpreted as divine retribution. There's real pressure here. People have confessed just to avoid the ritual, even if they were innocent. In the worst cases, the accused might be led to a local shrine for an ordeal test, drink from a blessed jar, step across a drawn line, answer questions posed by the priest in a very stern tone. Sometimes, the priest merely watches the accused's reaction and decides if guilt is visible in the eyes. That's not vague at all. Historians still debate how much these rituals actually influenced formal justice. Some believe they served as psychological tactics, scaring confessions out of people. Others argue they were culturally significant performances meant to reinforce social bonds and the community's shared faith in justice. Either way, they worked. People were terrified of divine punishment, even more than fines or beatings. Back in the village square, the boy is swearing again. The bread seller narrows her eyes. And just then, someone finds the missing loaf. A goat had taken it. The crowd laughs nervously. The boy collapses in relief. The goat remains smug, and just like that, balance is restored. For now. Let's say the goat didn't take the bread. Let's say the accusation stuck. And now, instead of a noisy scene in the village square, you're being dragged to an official court. This isn't some back-alley negotiation. This is the ancient Egyptian justice system in full force. And you're about to find out just how complicated and surprisingly bureaucratic it all really is. You're escorted to a plain, open-air chamber with pillars on either side and a scattering of scroll-holding scribes looking unimpressed. No marble steps or gavels here, but plenty of quiet judgment. The proceedings are overseen by a local official, but if it's serious enough, it gets kicked up the chain, eventually reaching the vizier, the pharaoh's right hand, the highest judge in the land. Think of him as the supreme court, prime minister, and most feared middle manager all rolled into one. You stand barefoot in the center. You're not in shackles. Egyptians favored public humiliation and restitution over mass incarceration. But your palms are sweating. Your knees feel like papyrus reeds, and the birds above seem a little too interested in your fate. First comes the statement of charges. A scribe reads it in a clear, practiced voice, the ink still drying on the papyrus. So-and-so is accused of stealing 1 loaf of bread, disrupting Ma'at, and lying under sacred oath. It sounds dramatic when read aloud, and worse, permanent, because every word is being recorded. Then you're allowed to respond. There are no lawyers, just your own wits and whatever eloquence you can summon after a sleepless night. You might invoke character witnesses, a neighbor, a family member, or the village priest who's still annoyed about that time you borrowed his basket. If they speak well of you, it helps. If they fumble or ramble, you start silently praying to Thoth. Evidence is presented next. That could mean physical items, a scrap of linen, a half-eaten loaf, even footprints in the dust. Or it could mean testimonies of the gods, aka symbolic gestures like holding a sacred statue while repeating your oath. If the gods are watching, everyone pays attention. Suddenly, sneezing in court becomes suspicious. The scribes record everything. In fact, scribes are the real power players here. Their records outlast your pleas. They don't make the decision, but they document it. And in a culture that treasures written truth, that's nearly as powerful. A bad scribe entry follows you forever. A good one might save your reputation. Finally, a decision is made. For minor offenses, the official might impose a fine, usually paid in goods, grain, linen, cattle. If you can't pay, the debt might extend to your family. More serious cases might involve public flogging, labor assignments, or property seizure. In rare cases, exile or execution, but theft. Unlikely, unless it was from the temple or a royal estate. Now, if your case somehow rises all the way to the vizier, things get really formal. The vizier's court is part courtroom, part temple, part administrative nightmare. You're judged not only on your crime, but on your alignment with Ma'at, truth, balance, order. If the vizier rules against you, there's no appeal. His word is law. His scrolls are sacred, and his expression is carved from stone. Historians still debate how much actual justice was served in these courts versus how much was social theater. Were poor people punished more harshly? Probably. Did scribes ever fudge the records? Possibly. But the system worked. For the state. For Ma'at. For balance. And if you're lucky, maybe for you too. You might think ancient Egypt, land of gods and monuments, would be too mystical for something as mundane as paperwork. Think again. Egyptians loved documentation. Every deal, promise, marriage, sale, and goat exchange was recorded with the dedication of a civilization that believed if it wasn't written down, it might as well not exist. And so, if you're involved in any kind of transaction, especially something legally binding, prepare for a lot of scribes, signatures, sort of, and scrolls. Let's say you're selling a goat. Not a prized show goat or sacred animal, just a regular, mildly uncooperative one. You can't simply shake hands and walk away. First, you need witnesses, at least 5, sometimes more. Why? Because those witnesses are your safety net. If the buyer later claims your goat was secretly 3 chickens in disguise, your witnesses can vouch for what they saw, preferably while sober. Then comes the scribe. He's not just there to take notes, he's the gatekeeper of legality. He pulls out a roll of papyrus, flattens it on his board, and begins to write with a reed pen dipped in black ink. The language is formulaic and formal. Something like, on the 3rd day of the month of Shemu, year 12 of the reign of Pharaoh so-and-so, the citizen, your name, son of your mother's name, did sell 1 goat, healthy and of average temperament, to the citizen, buyer's name, in exchange for 2 jars of beer, 1 woven linen tunic, and a promise not to return said goat under claims of bad behavior. It's beautiful, poetic, utterly dry, but absolutely necessary. You sign, not with your name, writing is still limited to the literate, but with a mark or symbol, usually drawn by the scribe with your approval. Sometimes you press a seal, a carved stone or clay tablet bearing your identifying symbol, into a small lump of wax or soft clay. Think of it as the original accept and agree checkbox. The contract is rolled, dried, and stored either at home or in a local record house. For more official transactions, like land sales, marriage agreements, or temple donations, it might be copied and stored in a temple archive, guarded by priests and accessible only by other scribes, with very tidy handwriting. Speaking of marriage, yes, even those were documented. A typical contract spelled out what each party brought to the union: land, livestock, dowry goods, and what would happen if one person decided to exit stage left. Divorce wasn't scandalous in ancient Egypt, but it was messy without paperwork. A good contract protected both parties from losing their property, their goats, or their peace of mind. Historians still admire how advanced and structured Egyptian legal contracts were. Some included warranties, yes, warranties, on slaves, tools, and livestock. If a purchased ox died within a week, the buyer might be entitled to a replacement, assuming, of course, it didn't die from obvious negligence, like being fed fermented lentils. Even personal oaths were documented, sworn by gods, marked in ink, and often recited aloud before witnesses. I will repay this jar of beer within 4 days. That sounds minor, until your neighbor sues you for breaking the sacred trust of brewery etiquette. So, in ancient Egypt, legality wasn't an abstract concept. It was tangible, documented, and deeply intertwined with divine order. Contracts weren't just about trust. They were about recorded trust, sealed in ink, and guarded by a very alert goat who now has a name because it's in the paperwork. Even after all the scribes, seals, and witnesses, there's one more layer to ancient Egyptian justice, and it's not written on papyrus. It's divine judgment, that ever-present, invisible court where the gods themselves keep track of your choices. Sure, the village officials might clear you of wrongdoing, but you still have to answer to Me'at, the goddess of truth, balance, and cosmic order. And if you think you can trick her, think again. She's got excellent memory and a divine feather that literally weighs your soul. This belief permeates everyday life. People whisper, the gods see all, not just to comfort each other, but to remind themselves that no lie goes unnoticed and no stolen chicken goes unpunished, at least not eternally. If the human justice system misses something, the divine one absolutely won't. This is comforting when you're wronged, and terrifying when you're the one eyeing an extra fig at market. When something bad happens, a broken pot, a sudden illness, an ox dropping dead for no apparent reason, the question isn't always what went wrong, but whose curse is this? Because in ancient Egypt, curses aren't fairy tale drama, they're real and they're serious. Let's say someone suspects you've lied in court. Maybe you denied stealing a sack of emmer wheat that absolutely did not walk away on its own. You swore innocence. The judge accepted it, but the village remembers, and worse. The gods might too. People begin to treat you a little differently. No one says it outright, but the water seller no longer greets you, and your cousin suddenly forgets to invite you to family feasts. Then you stub your toe, twice. A bird poops on your laundry. Your neighbor's goat starts screaming every time you walk by. Suddenly the whispers begin. Maybe he's cursed. Maybe Mahat is setting things right. Curse rituals are part of everyday temple life. Priests craft clay figurines representing enemies, then smash or burn them while chanting curses to bind their influence. If your name ends up on one of these dolls, well, may the gods have mercy. People believe these rituals could cause illness, infertility, madness, even death. That's why curses were written at the bottom of tomb walls, inside coffins, and under doorways. Whoever disturbs this grave, may scorpions bite their tongue and may their beer never ferment. A fate worse than death. And it's not just official priests handing out these spiritual slaps. Anyone with a little knowledge of magic could perform a private curse, using your name written on a pottery shard, buried beneath your threshold or floated down the Nile. You might never know until bad luck starts sticking to you, like papyrus glue. Historians still puzzle over how seriously people took divine retribution. Some argue it was a psychological tool, keep people honest through fear. Others believe it was deeply sincere, part of the metaphysical fabric of society. Either way, it worked. No one wanted to be cursed, especially by accident. Even a sarcastic joke about the gods could invite suspicion. So even if you win your case, clear your name, and keep your goat, you don't relax too much. You say an extra prayer, leave a small offering at the temple, and maybe tie a protective amulet around your neck, just in case. Because in ancient Egypt, truth wasn't just a matter of public record. It was a cosmic balancing act. And if you tipped the scales, the consequences might not show up on a scroll, but they'd find you all the same. You wake up and the air feels different, buzzing with anticipation, the scent of crushed flowers and warm barley drifting in through the shutters. It's a festival day, and while that might sound like fun, don't get too excited just yet. Because in ancient Egypt, festivals are less like backyard barbecues and more like carefully choreographed social and spiritual events with a dash of chaos thrown in for flavor. First, you have to get ready. Not just dressed, ritually presentable. If you're attending anything even mildly religious, you'll need a bath, oiling, freshly laundered linen, and probably a protective amulet tucked somewhere discreet. You skip breakfast to avoid garlic or fish, both of which are considered impure for temple events. Your neighbor's already out sweeping her doorstep with extra enthusiasm, which is either piety or passive aggression about last week's grain dispute. Maybe both. Down by the river or near the temple, preparations have been underway for days. Offerings arranged, incense bricks stacked like divine air fresheners, oxen groomed for ritual slaughter, though you secretly suspect one of them knows what's coming. Priests pace with scrolls and furrowed brows. The head scribe is barking about flower arrangements, and someone's dropped a jar of date wine, which is both wasteful and an omen, depending on who you ask. And then there are the statues. Yes, statues. In many festivals, sacred statues of gods are taken out of the temples and paraded through town, usually in barks, ornate ceremonial boats, carried by sweating, trembling temple workers. These barks don't float. They're hoisted on poles and processed along sacred routes, up hills, across courtyards, past every family who swears they just swept that spot 5 minutes ago. Participation is mandatory and complicated. If you're of age and status, you may be invited or expected to play a role. You might help carry offerings, recite hymns, or maintain crowd control with the patience of a crocodile. Not everyone gets to be part of the ceremony itself, but even onlookers must behave reverently, clap on cue, and shout the right acclamations at the right moments. No pressure. If you're caught out of line, literally or spiritually, you might be escorted out. Once you saw someone ejected from the Opet festival for sneezing too loudly near a sacred basin. To this day, that sneeze is reenacted with flair at village parties. Poor guy. Historians often describe Egyptian festivals as both sacred rituals and community bonding experiences. That's accurate, but it also leaves out how exhausting they can be. You're on your feet all day, navigating crowds, dodging people with incense burners, and trying not to spill lentil juice on your good tunic. Then come the protocols. You must greet priests with the correct hand gesture. You must never walk in front of the statue's bark. You must bow at prescribed angles. And if a royal family member is present, double everything. They've got their own entourage, their own perfumed fans, and their own schedule that somehow everyone has to adjust to. So yes, it's a festival, a celebration of the gods, a moment of connection between earth and divinity. But it's also a logistical labyrinth, a public performance. And, for those of us just hoping for a bit of free beer and some date cakes, an elaborate dance of etiquette and expectation. The real fun, that comes after the sun sets, if your sandals survive till then. As midday blazes overhead and the smell of roasted meat competes with sacred incense, you find yourself drawn, along with half the village, to the massive stone complex at the heart of it all, the temple. In ancient Egypt, temples are far more than places of quiet prayer. They're the epicenters of public life, spiritual energy, economic exchange, and during festivals, controlled mayhem. You step into the outer courtyard and the temperature drops noticeably. Not from magic, but from thick limestone walls built to block out the sun and the chaos beyond. The air smells like resin, sweat, and something flowery that probably cost more than your last 2 sandals combined. Every inch of wall is etched with hieroglyphs and images of gods, Horus spearing crocodiles, Hathor playing her sistrum, Thoth scribbling something cosmic and profound. You nod politely at them all, just in case they're watching. Inside, priests move with practiced precision. Most are barefoot, clean-shaven, and dressed in pure white linen. Some carry censers puffing fragrant smoke, while others handle jars, scrolls, or baskets of offerings. Bread, beer, fruit, goose meat, and little cones of fat that slowly melt into perfume on their heads. You briefly wonder how they keep it from running into their eyes. The public isn't allowed in the most sacred chambers. Those are reserved for the gods themselves, in statue form, nestled inside dark sanctuaries at the core of the temple. During festivals, however, those statues are brought out, carefully, reverently, placed on golden or gilded barks, and paraded along sacred processional ways. It's the divine equivalent of waving to the crowd from a royal balcony, except your balcony has 4 men grunting under the weight of a miniature shrine. These divine parades are more than just spectacle. They're considered moments of divine presence. When the gods physically visit the people, you shout praise, clap rhythmically, and occasionally toss flower petals or incense toward the bark, careful not to aim at the priests. Accidentally pelting a priest with an enthusiastic lotus offering is considered poor form. You learned that the hard way 2 years ago. Temples also host ritual performances during festivals. There might be a reenactment of a myth, say the battle between Horus and Seth, or Isis's search for Osiris. Villagers volunteer to play roles, or sometimes are volunteered by relatives with a sense of humor. Costumes, masks, and even live animals are used, especially if a crocodile or sacred cat makes a dramatic cameo. Music fills the air. Sistra jingle, drums beat, flutes trill, and everyone gets swept into the soundscape, whether or not they can carry a tune. The goal isn't perfection, it's praise. But if you're terribly off-key, a well-meaning aunt might gently elbow you toward a quieter spot near the back. And amid all the fanfare, the temple also serves a more grounded purpose, feeding the people. Offerings brought for the gods don't go to waste. After the rituals, much of the food is redistributed among the temple staff and the needy. You queue up with others, bowl in hand, eyeing the lentils and roast duck with reverence and very real hunger. That goose might have started as a sacred offering, but tonight it's going home in your lunch wrap. Historians still debate how much commoners engaged with these temple rituals versus simply spectating. But for you, participation is everything. It's community. It's tradition. It's a reminder that in this vast, structured world, where gods rule from shadowed chambers and viziers hand down judgment from on high, you're still part of the story. So you bow, you sing, you eat. The temple looms behind you, timeless and stern, but today it feels almost warm. The gods are out. The people are celebrating. And you, goose grease on your lips, flower petals in your hair, are exactly where you're supposed to be. As the sun dips lower and the rigid festival rituals give way to something looser, warmer, you feel it in the air. Relaxation. The statues have been paraded. The priests have receded. And now, it's your turn. Because what comes next is the social side of sacred celebration. Drinking, dancing, and the kind of music that rattles reed roofs and wakes up dozing cats. Let's be clear, ancient Egyptians took partying seriously, not in the chaotic modern sense of glow sticks and loudspeakers, but in a deeply joyful, often tipsy way that fused community bonding with divine praise. You see a group of women gathered near a makeshift pavilion, already laughing and passing around a clay pitcher of date wine. It's thick, sweet, and smells like fermented raisins with a splash of riverbank. You sip cautiously. It tastes like a loaf of bread went on vacation and came back in liquid form. Public drinking isn't taboo here. In fact, it's encouraged. Controlled intoxication is seen as a way to commune with the gods, especially goddesses like Hathor, who embodies music, dance, fertility, and the merrier aspects of life. Some festivals are held entirely in her honor, where worship literally involves getting cheerfully drunk. Priests would even start the morning with ritual drinking, just to get everyone in sync. Nearby, a musician with a lute-like instrument plucks out a tune, while a young girl shakes a sistrum, that metal rattle sacred to Hathor. You find yourself nodding to the rhythm, half trance induced by the wine. The beat is repetitive, hypnotic. Then, someone starts singing. The words are ancient, yes, but the message? Pretty universal. Dance with joy, for the gods are watching. Let your feet praise them with laughter. Let your voice climb the date palms. Soon the whole square is moving, children spinning in circles, grandmothers clapping on beat. Even the surly basket maker who usually complains about everything is tapping his foot. A man with a shaved head and a beard of braided linen starts juggling small gourds. No one knows why. Everyone cheers. Drinking isn't limitless, though. There's an unspoken line. You cross it, and suddenly your dancing becomes flailing, your praise becomes mumbling, and your aunt gives you the look. You've seen that look turn a festive evening into an early bedtime. Still, it's understood that a little wobble is holy. Anything beyond that is just impolite. Historians still puzzle over the role of music in ancient Egyptian society. Was it always sacred? Often, yes, but also incredibly communal. People sang work songs in the fields, lullabies to babies, chants to accompany chores. Music filled the gaps between rituals. It was comfort. And during festivals, it became a form of collective transcendence, a way to remind everyone, even if just for one evening, that life wasn't only about rules, harvests, and the threat of hippos. In the distance, someone's setting off a fire display, small, harmless sparks flaring into the twilight, made by tossing certain minerals into a flame. Children squeal. You take another sip of the wine and laugh without realizing it. Someone grabs your hand and pulls you into a circle dance, the kind with no steps, except don't fall down. And in that moment, you're not just celebrating a god. You're celebrating being alive. In the middle of a dust-worn village, under a sky painted with stars, surrounded by people whose lives are hard and beautiful and loud and sacred all at once. The music continues. The pictures pass, the night deepens, and you somehow feel lighter than you've felt all year. As darkness drapes itself over the village like a heavy linen shroud, the sounds change. The music doesn't stop. It just shifts. Drums slow, flutes soften, voices drop an octave. The revelry dims, and something older, more reverent, begins to rise from the warm night air. It's time for the night procession, when the line between divine myth and daily life starts to blur in the flickering light of oil lamps. You gather with others near the edge of the temple wall, holding a reed torch dipped in animal fat. It sputters to life, the flame dancing like a serpent's tongue. The scent is pungent, earthy, familiar. Around you, shadows stretch and sway across mud-brick walls, and whispers ripple through the crowd like the Nile through papyrus. And then out they come, the priests moving in choreographed silence, each holding something sacred, a scroll, a statuette, a tray of lotus blossoms, a golden bark cradling the image of a god. No words are spoken. The procession begins. These night walks aren't just aesthetic. They're narratives in motion. Each step reenacts a story, usually from the mythic cycle of Osiris, the god of death and rebirth. You know the tale well, even if no one tells it the same way twice. Osiris, betrayed and dismembered by his jealous brother Seth. Isis, his wife, who gathered his pieces and breathed life back into him. Horus, their son, who grew to challenge Seth and reclaim the throne. Tonight's version might feature priests dressed as Seth and Horus, enacting their cosmic duel with choreographed movements and symbolic props, feathers, staffs, masks. The bark carrying Osiris is carried solemnly, flanked by torchbearers like yourself. You're not performing, but you are participating. Everyone is. That's the point. Children watch wide-eyed. Elders murmur the old prayers under their breath. Even the goat tied to the date tree looks unusually thoughtful. The path winds through the village, past granaries and houses, finally circling back toward the temple's sacred lake, symbol of the waters of creation. Here, the bark is lowered, and offerings are made. Small dishes of food, wine, flowers, incense. A priest recites an invocation that's half chant, half lullaby. The words float into the night sky, mingling with the stars. Historians debate whether these nighttime rituals were more religious devotion or theater, but in truth, there's no real line between the two here. For Egyptians, mythology isn't a bedtime story. It's reality reenacted. Every retelling reaffirms cosmic order. Every gesture keeps chaos at bay. and every flame carried in procession is a tiny defiance of darkness. You stand there, torch in hand, watching as the final blessing is spoken. Then the lights are dimmed, each torch extinguished in the lake one by one. Yours hisses and dies, smoke curling upward like a prayer with no need for words. The crowd disperses slowly in pairs and clusters. Some return to music, others to sleep. You walk home barefoot, feet dusty, head full of flickering images. Not all festivals end in fireworks. Some end in silence. And that silence feels heavier and more holy than any feast. Tonight, the gods walked among you. Tomorrow, life returns to normal. But for now, in the hush of a darkened village, all is still. And for once, that feels enough. You awaken the next morning to the slow hum of village life creeping back in. No drums, no chants. Just the familiar sound of a grinding stone, a goat complaining about breakfast, and your stomach reminding you that yesterday's roasted goose has officially left the building. It's time to eat, and in ancient Egypt, that means diving into a daily menu that's humble, hearty, and surprisingly diverse. Breakfast is no fancy affair. Likely, it's flatbread and beer, but not the kind you're picturing. The bread is dense, dark, often studded with bits of bran or sand depending on how fast the flour was ground. You chew slowly, navigating the texture like a champ, knowing full well that even the wealthiest Egyptians had tooth problems from all the gritty grain in their diet. Beer, meanwhile, isn't a bubbly lager. It's a thick, porridge-like brew made from fermented barley, often flavored with dates or honey. You sip it out of a clay cup, sludgy but oddly comforting. It's more like breakfast soup with a mild buzz. Kids drink it too, just with less fermentation, hydration, calories, and a dash of sociability in every gulp. Later in the day, the food expands a bit. You might snack on lentils, onions, garlic, or cucumbers, often soaked in vinegar or mixed into pastes. Olives, figs, and dates are treats when in season. And if you're lucky, there's a dollop of soft cheese made from goat's or cow's milk. You eat with your hands, wipe your fingers on a linen cloth, and if there's a particularly good fig, you say a quiet thank you to Renenutet, the goddess of harvests. The main meal, served in the evening, is more substantial. Flatbreads again, but this time with stewed vegetables, maybe leeks or chickpeas cooked in earthen pots over open coals. If your family has done well, or if someone bartered well down by the quay, you might even have a bit of fish or a boiled egg. Meat is rarer, typically reserved for festivals or if an animal dies of natural causes and the gods give the okay. For the elite, of course, things look very different. Tables, well, low stands, grown under plates of roast duck, spiced lamb, honey cakes, imported fruits, and even wine from distant vineyards. But for you, and most of Egypt, it's about consistency and gratitude. A full belly means balance. It means Maat is still on your side. Food preparation is largely women's work, though in big households or temples, men and servants help too. Grinding grain, kneading dough, stirring stews. It's labor-intensive, constant, and often done communally. There's always someone humming a work tune or gossiping about which neighbor got caught stealing onions. Again, historians note that the Egyptian diet was surprisingly nutritious, plenty of fiber, fresh produce, and protein from legumes. But they also note the rampant tooth decay, thanks to sand-laced flour and rudimentary milling. Archaeologists love ancient Egyptian teeth for this very reason. They practically write their own histories. As you finish your meal, someone walks by with a basket of lotus roots, and you realize lunch may involve something new. Or at least slightly less chewy. You nod, content. You're fed. The sun is rising, and once again, you've survived another day on the slow, delicious, and occasionally sandy menu of ancient Egypt. After breakfast, you decide to linger near the cooking area, a sort of open-air kitchen that smells like wood smoke, crushed herbs, and last night's lentils reheated with ambition. In ancient Egypt, the kitchen isn't a separate room with a gleaming countertop and spice rack. It's more like a flexible workspace tucked into a courtyard or shaded corner, where every meal feels part of a grand survival routine. You glance at the grain grinding station, where two women are bent over large quern stones. One pours in emmer wheat, while the other rhythmically slides a handstone back and forth, pulverizing it into coarse flour. You've done it yourself. After 20 minutes, your arms ache, your palms are scraped, and your back feels about 600 years old. Now imagine doing that daily, before sunrise. For decades, yeah. Once the flour is ready, it's time to knead the dough. No stand mixer here, just strong hands, clay bowls, and water fetched from the river. There's a method: slap, fold, pinch, pat. You might mix in seeds, herbs, or bits of date for sweetness if you've got them. Dough is then shaped into round loaves, or pressed into clay molds, depending on whether it's a casual dinner or an offering to the gods. And then comes the heat. Ovens, Egyptian style. These are rounded clay structures, open at the top and front, like stubby volcanoes made for carbs. A small fire is lit inside to warm the walls. Then ashes are scraped out and dough slapped onto the hot interior to bake. The result? Dense, slightly smoky bread that lasts days if kept dry, though it could also crack a tooth if you weren't careful. Sand finds its way into everything. Nearby, a storage niche holds clay jars sealed with linen and wax. Some contain grain, others water, beer, oil, or dried legumes. You see baskets hanging from roof beams packed with onions, garlic, dried fish, anything you'd rather not share with rodents or wandering cats. Pottery shards labeled in ink or charcoal help identify contents. It's not a modern pantry, but it's clever, efficient, and built to outlast the Nile's moods. Refrigeration? Not a chance. But storage pits dug into shaded earth and cool ceramic jugs help keep perishables like milk or beer from turning sour. Well, more sour than usual. And for real longevity, foods are salted, dried, or smoked. You've had jerky that could probably survive a sandstorm and a century underground. Water, always crucial, is filtered through cloth and stored in porous jugs that cool by evaporation. Some families even place water pots in breezy spots to maximize the cooling effect. It's low-tech but ingenious, especially when it's 100 degrees and your only relief is a lukewarm sip from a jug named Old Reliable. Historians admire this household ingenuity. The kitchen wasn't just a cooking site. It was a daily workshop, a science lab, a gathering place. Children played nearby. Elders gave unsolicited advice. Cats loitered with suspicious innocence. As the dough bakes, you sit nearby, listening to someone hum an old milling song. It's off-key and slow, but familiar. The smell of warm bread fills the courtyard. A pot bubbles over a low flame, spitting lentil steam into the air. A dog naps in the shade. And for a moment, in this quiet little space carved out of time, you forget how hard life is. Because lunch is coming, and it smells like continuity. By midday, the sun hangs high and hot above the village, casting shadows short and sharp on the packed earth. But your thoughts aren't on the weather, they're on lunch. More specifically, lunch shared with others. Because in ancient Egypt, food isn't just fuel, it's social glue, a ritual of togetherness as sacred in its own way as any temple offering. You gather beneath a woven reed canopy with your family, some neighbors, and a few guests who conveniently happened to stop by right as the stew was finished. No one minds. Hospitality is a virtue here, and besides, what's one more bowl when the pot's already brimming? The food is placed on low tables or large shared trays. There are no chairs, no utensils, just squatting, kneeling, and fingers. Bread is your spoon, your scoop, and your napkin, all in one. If you're polite, you tear off pieces and dip them carefully. If you're a child, you grab with gusto and hope your mother doesn't notice. She always notices. Today's spread is humble but satisfying. A lentil and onion stew, a bowl of fresh cucumber slices with vinegar, a dish of salted fish, and of course, the ever-present flatbread. There's also fig jam if someone's been generous, and a jar of beer passed around with practiced rhythm. You take a sip and pass left. No one gulps. Everyone gets a turn. Conversation flows. It's light, peppered with jokes and village news. Someone's cow had twins. Someone else claims to have found a cobra in their laundry. Whether it's true or not, it earns a solid round of gasps, and one dramatic reenactment that ends with spilled lentils and laughter. Feasting isn't just for festivals. Even ordinary meals can feel special when shared. But during actual celebrations, the menu expands. On those days, you might see roast duck, grilled quail, honey-glazed pastries, and rare spices passed around like treasures. Food is offered to the gods first, of course, placed on altars, blessed, and then reclaimed by temple staff and distributed afterward. In larger homes, servants help prepare and serve meals, fanning guests and offering towels scented with lotus water. But in most homes like yours, the rhythm is more relaxed. People come and go. Plates are refilled. A toddler wanders off with a piece of cheese and is gently returned with the cheese mostly intact. Historians often point to these communal meals as a core of Egyptian social structure. Sharing food wasn't just kind, it was expected. Neighbors helped neighbors. If someone fell ill or had a bad harvest, they were invited in, given bread and soup, and reminded they weren't alone. You glance across the group. A grandmother breaks bread and hands it to a younger child without a word. An elder pours the last of the beer into 3 cups, careful to make them even. Someone leans back and hums an old worker's tune, tapping the rhythm on their clay cup. The sun begins to drift, and plates are scraped clean. There's no waste. Leftovers, if any, are saved, wrapped in palm leaves or tucked into small jars. A dog gets a bone. A chicken nabs a runaway fig seed. Life goes on. As you stretch out in the shade, belly full, heart light, you realize that in a world ruled by pharaohs and gods, it's these moments, shared food, shared laughter, that make you feel richest of all. Later in the day, after your stomach's settled and the buzz of midday life begins to slow, you make your way toward the local shrine. Not for prayer exactly, but for something that blurs the line between devotion and dinner, a ritual offering. In ancient Egypt, food isn't just eaten, it's shared with the gods, and that process is far more complex than placing a pear on a pedestal. You arrive carrying a small basket, a piece of flatbread, a few figs, and a dollop of honey paste wrapped in a lotus leaf. Modest, but sincere. Other villagers are already there, some leaving cooked fish or dried dates, others laying out bowls of milk or flowers soaked in perfume. It's not about extravagance. It's about respect, balance, and feeding the divine forces that, ideally, keep your crops growing and your household unburned. A priest, or in smaller shrines, a community elder trained in ritual, receives your offering. It's not just handed over casually. There's a sequence, an invocation of the god's name, perhaps Osiris, Hathor, or Ptah, followed by a short-spoken prayer, your head bowed, hands extended. You may not know the words perfectly, but you know the tone. Humble, hopeful, rhythmic. The kind of tone you'd use if politely asking the Nile not to flood your mud brick porch this year. The food is placed before the statue or altar. Depending on the temple, it might rest there for minutes or even hours. The belief isn't that the god eats the food in the literal sense, but that they absorb its essence, its spiritual sustenance. Afterward, the leftovers, still perfectly edible, are removed and distributed among priests, temple workers, and sometimes the poor. This system feeds both body and spirit, and the gods, they're not picky. Offerings can range from full roasted animals at major temples to a pinch of barley and a sincere heart in your courtyard shrine. What matters is intention, consistency, and keeping Ma'at, the cosmic order, in balance. Forget to give thanks for your meal, and the next harvest might not be so generous. Some families maintain home altars too, little niches with figurines of household gods like Bes or Tawarat. Here, daily offerings of water, bread, or incense are made. Children often participate, learning the motions early. They might fumble a prayer, drop a fig, giggle through a chant, but it's all part of the learning, and the gods, one hopes, have a good sense of humor. Historians point to Egypt's offering rituals as both spiritual acts and social mechanisms. They reinforced generosity, connected individuals to their community and cosmos, and gave people a sense of agency in a world full of floods, illness, and pharaohs with whims. The gods were mighty, yes, but they were also neighbors. You fed them, they protected you. It was a deal, a divine dinner arrangement. As you leave the shrine, you notice a child pressing a date into the hand of a statue with great ceremony. His mother bows slightly, smiling. The boy runs off. The god remains still, but maybe not entirely. Maybe somewhere beyond stone and shadow, a cosmic being feels just a little fuller. And maybe in this moment you do too. Your home in ancient Egypt isn't sprawling or luxurious, but it's yours, and it works. It's a compact, clever structure of sun-dried mud brick built to keep heat out and family in. The walls are thick, the windows small and high, and the roof flat, doubling as storage, workspace, and your go-to spot for stargazing after dinner. It might not scream glamour, but it whispers practicality, and in a land where every season can flirt with extremes, that's what matters most. You walk barefoot across a floor of tamped earth and woven mats. No marble tiles here, just firm, cool dirt swept clean every morning. The air smells faintly of ashes, dried herbs, and yesterday's stew. You pass by your sleeping mat, rolled in the corner. It's stuffed with straw, covered in linen, and about as soft as a slightly forgiving rock, but it gets the job done. The main living space is multifunctional. It's your dining room, kitchen prep zone, sitting area, and on really hot nights, it becomes your indoor sleeping area. A small recessed hearth in one corner is used to warm food and occasionally boil laundry water or light incense when someone's sick. Above, a few clay jars are wedged into wall niches, your pantry, medicine cabinet, and treasure chest all in one. You duck through a doorway to the storage room, where baskets of grain and dried goods are tucked away beneath linen cloths. There's a grinding stone, a spare oil jug, and a shelf with things that defy classification. Half-used amulets, broken clay figurines too sacred to throw out, and a lump of beeswax shaped suspiciously like your neighbor's dog. Long story. Then there's the courtyard, the heart of the household. This open-air space gets good light, but remains sheltered from winds. A vine grows along one wall, offering both shade and snacks. You often cook here in warm months, and sometimes guests gather here to gossip over beer and cucumbers. Children play, chickens roam, and if someone's feeling especially brave, laundry gets done. For wealthier Egyptians, homes can be more elaborate. Multiple rooms, painted walls, tiled floors, even indoor pools and servants' quarters. But even in modest homes like yours, there's attention to detail. Reed mats are woven with patterns. Jars are painted. Niches hold clay lamps and protective charms shaped like the eye of Horus. Every item has a place and a purpose. Historians marvel at how adaptable and efficient these homes were. In a landscape where the sun can scorch and sand can sneak into everything, the ancient Egyptian house was less about grandeur and more about balance between light and dark, public and private, sacred and everyday. You climb a ladder to the roof, where a small shaded canopy offers relief. Someone's drying onions up here, Someone else has left a folding chair made of palm wood and twine. At night, families come up here to sleep under the stars, watch for shooting lights, or share whispered stories of crocodile gods and sun barges. There's no plumbing, no electricity, no modern comforts, but there is rhythm, there is routine. And there is a deep, unspoken intimacy between you and your space. A home not built to impress, but to endure. You sit, the breeze rolls in, the walls glow with sunset, and somehow, in the middle of the world's oldest civilization, you feel utterly at home. As dusk deepens and stars poke their way into the Egyptian sky, your day begins to slow, gently, deliberately. It's time to wind down, but don't expect a soft mattress, silk sheets, and a playlist of ocean sounds. In ancient Egypt, sleep is practical, spiritual, and a little rough around the edges. Your sleeping arrangement is simple. A mat woven from reeds or straw, rolled out on the floor or, more often, on the flat rooftop to catch the cool desert breeze. Nights in the Nile Valley can turn chilly, even after blazing heat, so you might cover yourself with a linen wrap or curl up beside someone warm, your sibling, your spouse, a friendly dog who smells like riverbank and enthusiasm. For the wealthy, there are wooden beds with legs carved to resemble lion paws, sometimes topped with woven slats and pillows made of wood or alabaster. Yes, wooden pillows, curved headrests, designed to cradle the neck and keep elaborate wigs in perfect shape. Comfortable? Absolutely not. But they did the trick and made you look like a well-aligned corpse in the process. Before settling in, you perform a few nighttime rituals. You might burn a pinch of myrrh or frankincense to cleanse the air, part bug repellent, part spiritual hygiene. A quick prayer is whispered to Bess, the squat, lion-faced household deity who watches over sleep, children, and all things that go bump in the night. His fierce glare, painted or carved into amulets, is meant to scare away bad dreams and malicious spirits. You don't know if it works, but you're not taking chances. Some people place protective charms under their mats or draw symbols of the Eye of Horus on doorways to ward off nighttime dangers. Night is a liminal time, mysterious, powerful, a little bit sacred, a little bit scary. It's when the sun god Ra battles chaos in the underworld, and if he loses, the world doesn't wake. So yeah, you light that incense. You say that prayer, just in case. Then there's the soundscape of night, not silence, never silence. You hear the soft grumble of cattle, the occasional snap of a reed mat, the whistle of wind through narrow alleys, and sometimes a distant howl that might be a jackal or just someone telling a really dramatic bedtime story. You pull your linen wrap tighter. A mosquito buzzes by. You swat it, miss, and hope it decides to haunt someone else. People sleep in shifts. The night isn't always restful. Someone gets up to check the grain jars. Someone else takes a turn fanning the baby. If the Nile floods unusually high or a dog won't stop barking, neighbors might shout down from rooftops like squabbling owls. It's communal living, even at midnight. Historians believe dreams were messages from the gods. Some people recorded theirs on ostraca, pottery shards used like notepads, and took them to temple dream interpreters. A dream of flying might mean a blessing. A dream of drowning? Time to make an offering or apologize to whichever deity you've ignored. Eventually, though, your eyes grow heavy. The roof cools. The sky fills with constellations you don't name with Latin words, but with tales. Orion the god hunter, Sirius the Nile bringer. You shift. You breathe. You close your eyes. The world outside continues. Wind through palm fronds. Distant chants from a late-night shrine. The low gurgle of someone's amphora leaking. But inside your body, inside your little space on the roof, there is stillness. And in that stillness, you drift. Maybe toward a dream, maybe toward a whispered message from Thoth. Or maybe, finally, just towards sleep. The next morning, as the pale sky begins to blush with sun and the first rooster crows with annoying accuracy, you roll off your mat and back into the rhythm of daily life. Forget luxurious lie-ins or leisurely brunch. In ancient Egypt, the home doesn't run itself, and there's always something that needs sweeping, patching, grinding, or lighting. First on the agenda, cleaning. Homes gather dust faster than secrets in a palace corridor, and since your floor is earth-packed and the wind loves to deliver tiny gifts of sand, you begin with the reed broom. Not the bristly kind, more like a stiff fan that sweeps rather than scours. You work methodically, pushing dust into a pile near the doorway while trying not to inhale half of Lower Egypt. Someone else fetches water from the well or, if you're lucky, from a canal that isn't too muddy today. It's carried in large ceramic jugs balanced on the hip or head, and every trip is an exercise in balance and biceps. Water's needed for everything: washing, cooking, drinking, laundry, even dampening mud for repairs. That one jug sloshed just right can keep half the household afloat. Inside, a sibling is already at the grinding stone, working yesterday's grain into flour for today's bread. It's a loud, dusty task, and you can practically hear your future dentist sighing from across the centuries. Meanwhile, someone else checks the clay oven, making sure it hasn't cracked overnight or played host to a family of adventurous geckos. Next comes patchwork and repairs. Mud brick walls need regular maintenance, especially after rain or a spirited wrestling match between goats in the courtyard. Cracks are filled with wet clay, smoothed over with flat wooden paddles and left to dry in the sun. Roofs are swept and relayered with straw. Door hinges, leather straps tied to pegs, are adjusted to reduce that hideous creak that wakes the baby every single time. Then there's laundry day, which involves a flat stone, soap made from natron and oil, and a lot of elbow grease. Clothes are stomped, scrubbed, and laid out on rocks to dry. Linen gets stiff under the sun, so you beat it back into softness against a post while muttering about how nobody helps unless they need clean tunics by tonight. Children pitch in too. Smaller kids feed the chickens or chase off cats trying to raid the pantry. Older ones help gather firewood, roll up sleeping mats, or fan the hearth coals back to life. Even play often has a purpose. Clay dollhouses double as teaching tools for housework, and throwing pebbles into pots becomes practice for aiming food into actual jars without making a mess. Historians often note the sheer consistency of domestic labor in ancient Egyptian life. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't get etched into temple walls. But it made everything else possible, from festivals to farming to simply surviving the year. Homes may have been modest, but they were carefully, constantly tended. By midday, you're dusty, sun-drenched, and halfway through your list. You tie up your hair with a linen strip, take a swig of thick beer, and look around. The courtyard is clean, the hearth is warm, the bread is rising. The roof doesn't leak. The chicken is plotting again, but that's just part of life. And in the quiet satisfaction of a day's work well begun, you remember, the gods may live in stone temples, but it's people like you who hold the country together. One sweep, one patch, one perfectly balanced water jug at a time. As the afternoon heat begins to hum against the walls, you take a moment to step into the cool shade of your home altar niche, a small, quiet corner that doesn't look like much to a passerby. But to you, and to most Egyptians, it's the spiritual heartbeat of the household, where divine company is always welcome, even if they're a little quirky looking. Sitting proudly on the low clay shelf is a figurine of Bes, the squat bow-legged protector god with a lion's mane, bulging eyes, and a tongue that's always rudely sticking out. He looks less like a deity and more like someone's grumpy uncle turned carnival totem. But don't let the look fool you. Bes guards homes, repels nightmares, protects women in childbirth, and knows how to throw a protective stare like nobody else. His presence, whether carved from wood or molded in clay, is non-negotiable. Bes is joined by Taweret, the pregnant hippopotamus goddess with the back of a crocodile and the paws of a lion. She's terrifying in a comforting way, like a monster who only bites when someone threatens her family. Taweret watches over fertility, birth, and children. Her amulet is often hung near the sleeping mat or worn as a charm, especially by expectant mothers. You light a bit of incense, myrrh if you can afford it, dried herbs if not, and wave the smoke over the altar, murmuring a few words. These aren't formal temple prayers, just bits of songs or sayings passed down by your grandmother, half remembered and improvised. The gods don't seem to mind. You leave a few drops of beer, a fig, and a smile. Offerings in miniature. Throughout the house you spot protective charms tucked in clever places. An eye of Horus, blue glazed and chipped, dangles from a doorframe. A hieroglyphic charm for health is scratched into the wall near the hearth. A necklace of faience beads lies beside a child's toy crocodile. You once carved a tiny scarab out of soapstone and buried it near the granary. Just to be safe, these aren't random trinkets. They're powerful symbols in a world teeming with invisible forces. You believe in Maat, the sacred balance of all things. But that doesn't mean you'll leave your bread uncovered or your house unguarded. Even the most rational villagers will nod at the wisdom of wearing a lion-tooth pendant on a long journey, or slipping a hair of a beloved into a protection amulet. Historians still debate how literal ancient Egyptians were about these household deities. Were they taken as real beings, metaphors, or something in between? The answer, you suspect, is yes to all of it. The gods are real in the way love is real, invisible, potent, and always deserving of a daily nod and maybe a plate of beans now and then. Even dreams are part of this spiritual economy. If you have a particularly vivid one, say, you're flying over reeds or chased by crocodiles on stilts, you might consult a dream interpreter or whisper your fear to Bess. Maybe you'll draw the dream in charcoal and leave it at the altar. It's not superstition, it's insurance. Divine correspondence. Later, as you sweep the courtyard and catch sight of Tawaret's round belly glinting in the sun, you feel that old, quiet comfort. You're not alone. Your house isn't just mud brick and straw. It's inhabited, watched over, humming with unseen guardians who may look like strange animals but act like protective kin. And tonight, when you sleep, you'll do so with a charm under your mat and a soft prayer in your breath. Just enough magic to make the darkness feel friendly. The morning begins not with a rooster, but with the sound of a sharp voice calling names. You're not headed to the fields today, or the granary, or even the shrine. You're headed somewhere arguably more treacherous. School. Or more accurately, the scribe's house, the ancient Egyptian answer to education, discipline, and how to hold a reed pen without smudging ink all over your only tunic. Education wasn't universal in your time. Most people, farmers, craftspeople, laborers, learned by doing through years of watching parents, copying elders, and eventually being thrown into the task themselves. But for a few lucky children, usually boys, and mostly from middle or upper-class families, there was formal instruction in reading, writing, arithmetic, and how not to accidentally offend the gods by using the wrong determinative in a word. You're one of the lucky ones today. You clutch a bundle of reed pens, a pouch of black and red ink, and a few scraps of limestone. Ostraca, your ancient notebook. You're training as a scribe, a career path that might land you work in a temple, palace, tax office, or tomb. It's prestigious, tedious, and requires the patience of a sandstone statue. Class begins in the courtyard of the scribe's home, where students squat in the dust. There are no desks. The scribe, a lean man with sharp eyes and very few teeth, recites phrases from the instructions of Tahotep, a wisdom text that every pupil must memorize. You chant them back like a sleepy chorus line. Do not be proud of your knowledge. Consult the ignorant and the wise. Then comes writing practice. Hieroglyphs if you're highborn, hieratic, the cursive shorthand of officialdom. If you're practical, your pen scratches across the ostracon, forming an awkward ibis, a shaky eye, a thoroughly disgraced vulture. The scribe sighs. You try again. Mistakes are corrected with a flick of the stick. Not hard. Just enough to remind you that spelling cat as cobra might cost someone their afterlife paperwork. Apprenticeship is also common. If you're not destined for scribal work, you might shadow a craftsman, carpenter, potter, weaver, or stonecutter. You'll spend your early years hauling supplies, mixing clay, and learning not to chisel your own foot. Only after years of observation and practice do you earn your own tools and start receiving pay. Women typically learn at home, trained in household management, weaving, cooking, and healing. But there are rare exceptions. Female scribes, physicians, and even priestesses in major temples. They're respected, if not entirely common, and whispered about with equal parts awe and envy. Historians are fascinated by how much the ancient Egyptians valued knowledge. Scribes were powerful because they preserved memory. A single sheet of papyrus could outlive a dynasty. Learning wasn't about personal fulfillment, it was about order. To write was to control chaos. To calculate was to appease Ma'at. You spend the rest of the lesson copying legal proverbs and tax receipts, dreaming of the day you'll be paid to write something less boring, maybe a hymn, maybe a love letter. Or, let's be honest, maybe a complaint about grain storage with just enough sarcasm to feel satisfying. When class ends, your back aches, your ink is smeared, and your ostracon looks like it's been trampled by sacred ibis, but you smile anyway. You're learning. You're part of something bigger. And someday, when you've earned your title and your own reed pen, maybe you'll sit on the other side of this courtyard. Stick in hand, eyebrows raised, ready to correct a cobra cat mistake of your own. Later in the week, your instructor assigns you a rare treat. Well, rare if you're not already a high-ranking scribe or priest. You've been given permission to visit the scroll chamber, a quiet, cloistered room tucked deep in the temple complex. It's not exactly the open stacks of a public library. More like a scriptorium meets sacred vault, where knowledge sleeps in neat rolls of papyrus, guarded by stone walls, incense smoke, and suspiciously watchful cats. The moment you step inside, your ears adjust to the stillness. No market chatter. No clanging tools, just the soft brushing of reeds on papyrus and the distant echo of a hymn from another room. The air smells of dust, dried ink, and centuries of secrets. Scrolls are stored upright in wooden cubbies or wrapped tightly and tucked into ceramic jars. Each bears a label in red ink, a title, maybe a date, sometimes the name of the scribe. You recognize a few: the Book of the Dead, the Instructions of Amenemope, and even a collection of grain inventories from 40 years ago. All of it matters. All of it is preserved. You sit cross-legged beside a low table while an older scribe unfurls a scroll with precise fingers. The pages crackle faintly. They're made of papyrus, pressed and dried reeds glued together into long, continuous strips. Some scrolls span dozens of feet, requiring multiple people to read properly. Today's selection is short. A prayer to Thoth, god of writing, wisdom, and questionable bird heads. You study the script carefully. Rows of hieratic characters, each written with an elegance that makes your own work look like a goose wrote it mid-flap. There's structure here. Opening invocation, main text, closing formula. You trace the strokes with your eye, not your finger. Touching the sacred text with dirty hands is a good way to be demoted to sweeping duty for the next lunar cycle. Scrolls like these are copied and recopied over generations. Some are practical: tax laws, medical remedies, land deeds. Others are poetic: hymns, mythologies, philosophical musings. A few are jokes, tucked in margins or written on scrap for entertainment. Yes, even scribes have bad days and want to doodle a cat stealing fish from an offering table. The scrolls are usually housed in temple libraries, accessible only to trained scribes and priests. These aren't public spaces, more like intellectual sanctuaries, where knowledge is revered as divine currency. Many temples have their own house of life, a kind of scribal academy and document archive rolled into one. This is where lives are recorded, gods praised, and bureaucrats quietly reminded of their math mistakes. Historians still argue over just how widespread literacy was. Some suggest that only 1 to 2% of the population could read and write, concentrated among elite males and temple staff. Others believe there was more functional literacy than we credit, especially among merchants, craftsmen, and women managing estates. What's clear is this: in ancient Egypt, writing was power. If you could record grain deliveries, read omens, or compose a spell, you held a piece of eternity in your hand. Names written down lasted forever. Stories written down could resurrect the dead, at least on the page. As you leave the scroll chamber, your arms are empty, but your mind feels heavy in the best way. You're thinking of calligraphy and gods, of names and echoes. You pass a cat on the threshold. It stares at you with the judgment of a librarian and a demigod rolled into one. You bow, just in case. Later that evening, as the village quiets and the sky begins to bloom with stars, you settle into your favorite spot in the courtyard, knees tucked, head resting on your arms, ready for a different kind of lesson. No scrolls, no reed pens. Just stories. Because in ancient Egypt, not all learning came from temples or tutors. Much of it came from listening. From the mouths of elders, traveling storytellers, or your own parents, whose voices carried myths like heirlooms. These weren't just bedtime tales. They were blueprints for understanding gods, nature, justice, and why cats deserve their own temples. Tonight, it's your aunt's turn to tell the story. Her voice is raspy but clear, and everyone hushes as she begins. In the beginning, she says, the world was water, nothing but water and dark, until Ra rose from the lotus, bright as gold, full of names. You know this one, but you still lean in. She tells of Ra, the sun god, who spoke the world into being, who created Shu and Tefnut, sky and moisture. Then comes Geb and Nut, earth and sky, forbidden to touch, but drawn together anyway, birthing gods in defiance. There's drama, betrayal, love, lightning. You can almost see it playing out in the sky above you. Then comes the story of Osiris and Isis, the divine couple torn apart by Set, the jealous brother who scattered Osiris's body across Egypt like a horrific scavenger hunt. Isis, loyal and clever, gathers the pieces, resurrects her husband, and conceives Horus, the falcon-headed avenger. Horus grows, battles Set, and restores balance. The classic good versus chaos, but with more crocodiles and divine prosthetics. Everyone knows the story, but each telling brings something new, a different emphasis, a forgotten detail, a joke slipped in to make the younger children giggle. Your aunt adds her flair tonight, mimicking Set's tantrums and giving Isis the kind of side-eye that could wilt papyrus. These stories teach more than myth. They encode values. Osiris teaches justice and rebirth. Isis models loyalty, wit, and maternal devotion. Set? He's a walking warning sign. Don't let anger drive you, or you might end up a footnote in a god's comeback arc. Then come the lesser-known tales. The one where Thoth creates writing from the laughter of the moon. The tale of the destruction of mankind, where Hathor almost wipes out humanity in a divine rage, only to be tricked with beer dyed red to look like blood. These stories are strange, rich, and layered, equal parts theology, humor, and cosmic therapy. Historians debate whether these myths were seen as literal history or allegory, but in practice it didn't matter. They were truths in story form, the kind that stuck when all else fell away. You didn't need to read them to remember them, you just needed a fire, a voice, and time. Your aunt ends the tale with a flourish and a final moral. Even the gods must listen to Ma'at. So should we. Everyone nods, someone yawns. The youngest is already asleep, thumb in mouth, dreaming of gods with falcon heads and sisters who outwit chaos. As the fire crackles low, you feel the warmth of both flame and familiarity. You've learned something tonight. Not from a scroll or a lesson, but from the oldest classroom of all, a shared story under the stars. As dawn stretches over the Nile again, your thoughts drift not to chores or offerings, but to something deeper, how everything you know, everything you do, has been shaped by those who came before. In ancient Egypt, knowledge isn't just taught, it's inherited. Passed not only from scribe to student or priest to novice, but through families, guilds, rituals, and quiet repetition, again and again, across centuries. Your grandfather taught you how to recognize safe reeds from ones that will slice your hands. He didn't sit you down with a formal lecture. He just showed you, once, twice, 100 times, until it became part of how your fingers moved. Your mother sang the same lullabies her grandmother sang. You still hum them when you grind grain or need to remember how to braid rope. It's education by osmosis, history through habit. Some lessons are encoded in objects, the way you tie your sash. That's your great aunt's technique, the shape of the bread mold, modeled after your father's favorite. Even the small cuts on your fingertips, earned while learning to slice dates just right, they echo a moment shared long ago, a mistake gently corrected, a memory etched into muscle. You remember watching an elder carve a scarab amulet, his hands wrinkled but steady, his voice explaining the symbolic weight of each line, not to impress, but to preserve. A scarab is not just a beetle, he told you. It's the sun rolling through the sky. It's rebirth. It's what keeps time moving forward. You didn't forget. You never will. And now, when a younger cousin stumbles while reciting a hymn, you're the one who gently steps in. You guide their fingers along the shape of the words. You pause at the difficult parts, not to shame them, but to help them slow down. You've become the vessel. You carry the past, and you are the future of it too. Historians sometimes struggle to piece together how informal learning worked in ancient Egypt, because it didn't leave the same evidence as temples or tomb inscriptions. But you know, you live it. Learning is a loop, not a ladder. There are no diplomas, no graduation ceremonies, just the act of knowing and the deeper act of sharing that knowledge without keeping it for yourself. Even stories mutate with each generation, gaining color, humor, or caution, depending on who tells them. The myth of Isis becomes more about cleverness in your mother's voice, more about loyalty in your uncle's. You learn what your family values by how they frame the gods. That's education as worldview, wrapped in metaphor and myth, no tuition required. In temples, priests pass sacred texts to the next chosen initiate, one scroll at a time, as if transferring a flame. In homes, parents pass down how to store grain, where to place an amulet, how to balance work and worship. Some knowledge is sacred, some is practical. All of it is precious. And one day, it'll be your turn to shape a scarab, to explain why the Nile floods, to remind a child how to pronounce a prayer that was first spoken 1,000 years ago. You'll pause, smile, and realize that in this place, immortality isn't a miracle, it's a memory well kept, a skill well taught, a name spoken just one more time. There's something in the air this morning, an extra hum, a lightness in people's footsteps, a smell of fresh bread mixed with perfumed oil and anticipation. The festival is coming. Maybe it's one of the major religious feasts, like the beautiful festival of the valley, or perhaps a more local celebration for a patron god. Whatever it is, the whole village is buzzing, and guess what? You're in the thick of it. The first sign was yesterday. Market stalls doubling in number, vendors calling louder than usual, even a few traveling entertainers straggling in with instruments slung over their backs. Today, the preparations begin in earnest. Everyone's got a task, and no one, literally no one, is allowed to sit idle unless they're a temple statue. Your day starts with sweeping the courtyard, which sounds boring until you realize it's also the unofficial neighborhood news exchange. Everyone's out, chatting, trading rumors about which priests are preparing the procession, which dancers have been practicing under moonlight, and whether last year's beer accident will repeat itself. Long story. It involved a goat and a very slippery ramp. The air is alive with music rehearsals, flutes, sistrums, and deep drum beats echo from the temple walls. A group of girls, faces streaked with red ochre and anticipation, practice their dance steps in a slow, graceful line near the riverbank. They move in time to a beat that you can feel in your ribs even from 50 paces away. One stumbles, everyone laughs. They reset and begin again. Meanwhile, back home, your household is elbow-deep in food prep. Flatbread is being baked in rounds, and jars of beer are sealed for the festival crowd. Someone's plucking dates. Someone else is carefully arranging a platter of salted fish and honeyed nuts. Not for you, of course, but for the temple offering. That said, if a few extra treats find their way to the unofficial tray in the corner, no one's looking too hard. The artisans are out in force. Carvers are polishing statues, painting their faces with fresh color, while others mend the decorative floats that will carry sacred images through the streets. There's even someone sewing new linens for the god's image, because even divine statues deserve a wardrobe refresh once a year. The children, of course, are underfoot. Some are more help than hindrance, ferrying messages between households or helping hang garlands. Others are mostly there to get in the way and sample the snacks when backs are turned. You spot one emerging from behind a storage jar with suspiciously sticky fingers. Classic. Festival prep is work, yes, but it's the fun kind of work. There's laughter, teasing, a sense of shared anticipation that makes your chores feel like rehearsing for a play. And the best part? Everyone participates, from high-born scribes to humble potters. The village becomes a single humming organism, united in purpose, to honor the gods and maybe sneak in a little dancing while they're watching. Historians often wonder how much of ancient Egypt's social unity stemmed from these festivals. But when you see the way the streets transform, the way even the grumpiest neighbors tie on celebratory sashes, you understand. These events aren't just about worship, they're about community, renewal, and the sheer joy of gathering. And as you tie up the last of the garlands and step back to admire the color, the music swells again. A sistrum shakes. A flute trills. Somewhere in the distance, drums begin their slow, steady thump. It's almost time. By mid-morning, the dusty paths have transformed into processional roads. The scent of burning incense dances on the air, weaving between the chatter of neighbors and the excited yelps of children, too small to understand what the festival is really about, but thrilled by the energy nonetheless. Today is the day the gods leave their sanctuaries and take a stroll among mortals, and you've claimed your spot early. You're squatting just off the main road, your best tunic dusted but tucked, your face cleaned with Nile water that was, miraculously, only a little murky this morning. Everyone wants a glimpse of the divine bark. First, the music. Flutes, lyres, and the metallic jangle of sistrums fill the air. The priests begin to emerge, wrapped in fresh white linen, their skin oiled and faces solemn, even if you know one of them once tripped over a temple cat and cursed in 6 dialects. Behind them, dancers move in slow rhythm, arms outstretched like wings, eyes lifted as if already halfway to the afterlife. Then it arrives. The god's shrine, carried atop a ceremonial boat, though there's no water here. The boat rests on gilded poles, lifted by a dozen sweating men who trained for this all month. The bark gleams with gold and semi-precious stones shaped like a vessel destined to sail across the sky itself. Inside, hidden behind veils and shadowed curtains, is the image of the god. Not a statue exactly, but something more, a presence in form. an embodiment of protection, fertility, or vengeance, depending on whose turn it is this year. You bow your head as it passes, even if your stomach is rumbling and someone's elbow is in your side. There's a moment when the energy shifts. The parade isn't just performance. It's participation in the cosmic order. The god walks among you, sees you, maybe even blesses your household just by passing near. After the shrine comes the crowd of attendants, priests carrying incense, scribes jotting down omens, boys with baskets of offerings, women tossing petals. Some carry votive images, others small trays of bread and beer. Everything has meaning. Even the color of the ribbon on a dancer's wrist may represent a part of the Nile's annual story. There are masks and costumes too. You spot one man dressed as a crocodile, his snout bobbing comically as he sidesteps a puddle. Another wears a lion's head. Not scary, just sacred in the way a joke can be sacred. A reminder that even gods appreciate a bit of theater. And then the townsfolk join in. You do too. The crowd begins to follow the procession through the streets, singing hymns you half remember and making up the rest. Children run ahead, pretending to be priests, parroting chants in giggling voices. Merchants pause their stalls, bowing heads, while old women sprinkle perfume on the threshold of their homes. Historians call this a ritual drama, but to you, it's simply life at its most alive. This is the one time each season when everything stops and the boundary between sacred and ordinary dissolves. Your dusty road becomes a river. The heat becomes holy. Even the goat watching from a rooftop looks like he understands what's going on. When the procession finally passes, disappearing toward the temple for the ritual reenactments and offerings, you stand in its wake with aching feet, sunburned skin, and a strange fullness in your chest. Not because you saw a god, but because for a moment you were part of something divine. By the time the god has returned to the temple and the final chants drift into silence, the tone of the festival changes. The solemn reverence of the morning makes way for something far more human, feasting, laughing, and the occasional off-key flute solo. The gods have been honored. Now the people celebrate. The central plaza is packed. Mats are laid out, baskets unloaded, and amphorae uncorked. You follow the smells like a cartoon character. Grilled duck, lentils stewed with garlic, dates soaked in wine, and flatbreads so fresh they steam when broken. Everyone shares what they can. Even the poorest families bring something to contribute. Maybe a jug of beer, a handful of nuts, or a sweet cake made with fig paste and a suspiciously large amount of joy. You find a shady corner with your family, your plate balanced precariously on your knees. You eat with your fingers, you lick them between bites. You try to save the best piece of goose for last, only to have a cousin swipe it when you're distracted by a juggling act that's just begun. Because yes, now come the entertainers. First, the musicians, young men with lyres, older women with rattles and tiny hand drums, and one eccentric uncle with a shoulder harp and exactly 2 songs he knows how to play. One of them is a hymn. The other is probably not. The crowd cheers anyway. Then the acrobats take the stage, or rather, the flat bit of sand between 2 trees. Children squeal as a boy flips backward over a stool, then walks on his hands for 5 paces, while a girl balances a pot on her head and recites a love poem at the same time. It's like watching a romantic letter delivered via somersault. Dancers follow, dressed in linen so light it flutters like wings. Their routines vary. Some mimic animals, others mimic stars, and one group appears to be reenacting a famous myth, using only body movements and a suspicious amount of eye contact. There's grace, rhythm, and occasional chaos when the drummer gets too excited and throws everyone off beat. Laughter follows. They reset, start again, and of course there are storytellers. They don't wear robes or wave scrolls. They just step into the circle and speak. Their voices rise and fall with the sun, painting tales of lost kings, clever servants, scheming crocodiles, and one goat who somehow defeated a demon by bleating in the right key. You laugh so hard at that one, beer nearly comes out your nose. Feasting isn't just about food. It's about presence, about sharing breath and stories with the people around you. It's when you catch up with a friend you haven't seen since the last flood. When a grandmother offers unsolicited advice between bites. When a marriage proposal is made, half joking, half serious, because the atmosphere is that good. Historians call it ritual communal bonding. You just call it living. As the sun dips low and shadows stretch long, the music softens into background hum. You lean back, belly full, cheek warm from sun and laughter. Someone nearby starts a quiet hymn, joined one by others until the air is laced with melody again, this time not for the gods, but for each other. And in that golden hour, with everyone relaxed and glowing, you realize festivals aren't just a break from life. In many ways, they are life, condensed, colorful, and unapologetically joyful. As twilight thickens and the last light bleeds gently from the horizon, the village begins to slow. The noise doesn't stop, it just softens like someone turning down the volume on a day that's played every note. You're full, not just from food, but from laughter, movement, music, and myth. But the festival isn't quite over yet. There's one last act to finish the day, and it's one of your favorites. The evening offerings begin quietly. At the edge of the temple, a line forms, not commanded, just understood. One by one, villagers step forward, leaving behind simple gifts: a flower, a piece of bread, a little beer, a carved token, a handful of incense. Some of these are symbolic, others heartfelt. A woman sets down a tiny doll made from straw, her face unreadable, but her fingers trembling slightly as she places it near the altar. A young boy, missing a front tooth, sets down a single date. The priest blesses it all the same. You wait your turn, fingers wrapped around your offering. Just a small clay bead you made as a child, kept for luck. But today feels like the right day to let it go. When your moment comes, you place it carefully and whisper a few words to the god. No one hears them but you. You step back, your heart just a little lighter. Near the fields, bonfires crackle to life, and the remaining guests gather around them. This is when the wine comes out, well-watered and weak by modern standards, but more than enough to stir stories loose. The elders begin to speak again, not myths this time, but personal tales. How they met their spouse, how they avoided temple taxes barely, how they swore a statue once blinked at them. It's quieter now, softer, more introspective. You sit cross-legged near a smaller fire, gently roasting a fig on a stick, watching the way the flames bend and dance. Across from you, a grandmother hums a lullaby. To your left, a friend gently braids someone's hair. Someone passes around a jar of sweet beer. You sip, savor, and lean back. Historians still argue whether Egyptian festivals were religious devotion or community recreation. The truth is, they were both. You honored the gods, you reconnected with neighbors. You remembered your place in a world that was orderly, divine, and very, very dusty. Children begin to doze off in laps and arms. The fires burn low, not extinguished, just dimmed. A few people sing softly, songs without instruments, barely above a whisper. The stars are so bright tonight it feels like someone scrubbed the sky clean. The Milky Way stretches wide overhead, and someone mutters that it's the path of the sky goddess Nut, arched eternally over the world. You nod. Whether or not it's true doesn't matter. It's beautiful. It feels true. Before long, families gather themselves and drift home, arms around each other, sandals dragging just a little slower than usual. The streets are quieter now. The god has returned to the temple, the dancers rest, the bread has been eaten. You lie down that night still wearing your festival sash, your hair dusty, your heart calm. A whisper of incense lingers in your blanket. Somewhere, far off, a drum beats one last time. And in that final moment before sleep, you smile. Not just because of what happened today, but because of what it meant. That once again, you belonged. Not just to a village or a god, but to a rhythm that had pulsed across Egypt for thousands of years and still held you gently in its hands. Morning comes with a cough. Not yours, someone else's. Loud, hacking, and unmistakably coming from the neighbor's courtyard. It's enough to rattle the ibis off the fence. You stretch, roll over, and try to ignore it. But by the time your own throat tickles and your joints complain, it becomes clear. You're not at 100% today. And in ancient Egypt, that means it's time to visit the most trusted person in the neighborhood, the healer. Forget the dramatic imagery of priests waving ankhs over glowing patients. Most healing happens right here in the village, delivered by someone who's part doctor, part magician, part herbalist, and part storyteller. In your case, it's Hetep-Seneb, an older woman who smells like crushed garlic and speaks to bees. She once healed a broken ankle by wrapping it in linen soaked in beer and honey, muttering to a clay figurine of Sekhmet the whole time. You don't knock. Nobody knocks. You announce yourself with a half-hearted groan. She looks up from grinding something green and murky in a stone bowl, squints at you and says, "Ah, you again. Welcome to ancient Egyptian medicine, where science, spirituality, and a bit of showmanship collide." She sits you down, lays a hand on your forehead, and starts asking questions. How you slept, what you ate, whether you've offended any ancestors lately. You try to answer while also sneezing into your elbow, which earns a muttered prayer to Thoth. She listens to your breathing, looks at your tongue, and then reaches for her basket of remedies. Out comes the honey jar, because honey is the duct tape of ancient medicine. It's antibacterial, tasty, and doubles as a bribe for uncooperative toddlers. Then there's garlic, good for warding off illness and certain neighbors. She mashes it with coriander seeds and a pinch of powdered lapis lazuli. Yes, actual lapis. It's not just for jewelry. In powdered form, it's thought to calm fevers and make you dream of useful things. She hands you a hot poultice wrapped in linen and instructs you to hold it to your chest while she recites a healing spell to Isis, full of flowing metaphors and a few words that sound suspiciously made up. Still, you nod solemnly, because in ancient Egypt words have power. The wrong ones can harm, the right ones can cure, or at least comfort. Historians love to argue over how effective this mix of medical and magical practice really was. Some treatments, like the honey poultice, are scientifically sound. Others, like swallowing ground hippo tooth mixed with date wine, are less, let's say, peer-reviewed. But what matters to you, sitting here as the sun rises and the garlic stings your nose, is the care, the ritual, the way she ties the linen just so, tucks a tiny amulet under your sash, and tells you you'll feel better by nightfall, or the next flood, whichever comes first. You believe her. You head home with a pouch of herbs, a warning not to eat figs until your humors realign, and a lingering chant stuck in your head. It's part spell, part rhyme, part nursery song. You hum it as you lie down. And by the time sleep rolls in again, warm and slow, you're already feeling just a little bit better. You wake to the earthy smell of herbs boiling in water, a sign that someone in your household has taken your diagnosis seriously. Welcome to Egyptian home healthcare, where healing isn't just for priests or professional healers. It's also a family affair, made from ingredients within arm's reach and beliefs as old as the Nile itself. In your kitchen space, or more accurately, that shaded corner with 3 pots and a fire pit, your aunt stirs a pot of fenugreek, anise, and carob, muttering to herself about the price of dried mint and how no one respects traditional remedies anymore. You know better than to interrupt. She's in full apothecary mode, and the last time you questioned her brew, she threatened to send you to the next world with a teacup. Homemade remedies are as essential as grain and gossip in an Egyptian household. There's a mixture for everything: coughs, headaches, sour stomachs, snake bites, love sickness, even nightmares. You've tried most of them, some effective, some questionable, all prepared with conviction and wrapped in layers of ritual and familiarity. For your current ailment, your aunt ladles out a thick herbal tea into a chipped bowl. It tastes like coriander mixed with old socks, but you drink it anyway. She places a warm poultice on your chest and hums a tune that sounds suspiciously like the lullaby you heard as a child. Whether it's the herbs, the heat, or the memories, something begins to unwind inside you. In ancient Egyptian households, healing involved more than just ingredients. It was about balance, keeping the body in tune with the universe. Illness, they believed, came from an imbalance of internal forces, evil spirits, or divine displeasure. So, along with the remedies, your aunt takes out a protective amulet, carved from glazed faience, shaped like an eye. The Eye of Horus. She places it under your headrest and says, "It will watch while you rest." There's also a ritual cleansing, just to be thorough. She crushes natron salts into a powder, mixes it with river water and a few drops of myrrh oil, and splashes your feet with it. Not a spa day exactly, but the cold water and sharp scent jolt you awake. Then she draws a line in the sand around your mat, a symbolic circle of protection. You ask why she bothered with that, and she says, "Because the last time I didn't, you dreamed of scorpions." Fair enough. Historians now believe ancient Egyptians had a surprisingly advanced understanding of medicine, setting broken bones, cleaning wounds with honey, even minor surgeries. But what's often overlooked is the emotional intelligence embedded in everyday care. These rituals might not all have been biologically effective, but they provided comfort, control, and connection. You lie back, body cooling, breath slowing, and your aunt finally sits. She's tired. She's proud. She's watching you the way people watch seedlings after the first rain. Not because they expect miracles, but because they've seen them before. As sleep overtakes you again, you clutch the amulet lightly, not because it's magic, but because someone you love believes in it. And that might just be enough to heal what hurts. As your cough lingers and the village healers declare you not dying but certainly inconvenient, your family decides it's time for a bigger step, a visit to the temple sanctuary, a place where medicine, magic, and divine intervention intertwine. You groan at the effort, but deep down, you're curious. Because temple healing isn't just treatment, it's an experience. The temple looms like a ship of stone, its columns rising in orderly rows, each carved with sacred names and spells. The air inside is cool, laced with incense, and utterly still. You walk past rows of painted deities, each one frozen mid-gesture, mid-miracle. There's Thoth, the god of wisdom, Sekhmet, goddess of disease and its cure, and Imhotep, once a mortal physician, now revered as a divine healer. You're led into a side chamber where the ritual of incubation will take place. No, you're not a chicken. This kind of incubation is about sleeping in a sacred space, hoping to receive a healing dream, a message from the gods, or just a divine nudge in the right direction. The priest hands you a charm wrapped in linen and whispers a prayer so quietly it sounds like wind through rushes. You lie on a mat beside other hopeful sleepers. Some are children, some are old. One man is muttering the name of a lost lover. Overhead, oil lamps flicker, casting shadows that look suspiciously like wings. A priest anoints your forehead with oil infused with frankincense, then places a scroll under your headrest, a symbolic transfer of wisdom to your dreams. No talking is allowed, no food, no distractions, just the silence, the scent, and your breath slowing as you close your eyes. And then, who knows, maybe you dream of Sekhmet's lion eyes narrowing, then softening. Maybe Imhotep appears with a clipboard and perfect bedside manner. Or maybe it's nothing but a blur of colors, of rushing wind, and the feeling of being deeply known. Ancient Egyptians believed these dreams carried real meaning, that gods spoke through visions, offered cures through metaphor or direct instruction. One woman claimed she was healed when she dreamed of being kissed on the cheek by a cobra. Another swore her lameness vanished after dancing with a golden calf in her sleep. When you awaken hours later, it's still night. The temple is quiet. You feel groggy, unsure of whether you dreamt at all, but your breathing is easier, your skin is cool, and somehow you feel aligned. A priest approaches and gently lifts the scroll. He reads it silently, nods, then whispers, "Your dream was peaceful." That is a good sign. You're given a sip of sacred water, drawn from a pool believed to be blessed by the gods, and a dried fig to ground you before walking. The floor feels steadier beneath your feet. Your body aches less. Historians debate whether temple healing was effective or merely psychosomatic theater, but in your bones you feel something has shifted. The rituals, the silence, the belief, they did something. Maybe it was the gods, maybe it was you, but either way you're walking home. And that's more than you could do yesterday. The days after your temple visit pass like silk unrolling. Slowly. Softly. You're not completely well, not yet, but there's a change. The coughing has eased. Your limbs don't feel like river clay. You can walk a few lengths without wheezing, and your appetite is back, which your mother takes as proof of divine approval. She immediately hands you a double portion of lentils and declares you fit enough to carry water again. Progress. In ancient Egypt, recovery isn't rushed, it's respected. Once you've passed the critical moment, when the god has either healed you or left you to your own devices, your job is to regain strength while avoiding the jealous glances of spirits who may still lurk about, sniffing for weakness. To help with that, you're given an amulet, a small glazed charm shaped like a jed pillar, symbol of stability. You're told to wear it near your chest, close to your lungs. It might be superstition, it might be medicine. Either way, you don't take it off. Your aunt prepares light stews. Your cousin makes you laugh too hard. Your father quietly places a piece of carnelian near your headrest for extra protection. He doesn't say why, but you know the stone is meant to ward off illness and bring strength. These gestures aren't grand, but they're consistent. Healing is a community event, and your health reflects not just your body, but your place within that web. To help speed things along, a neighbor brings over a protection charm written on linen, inked in red and black with a verse dedicated to Bes, the dwarf god of joy, protection, and chaotic energy. He's often shown with a lion's mane and a tongue sticking out, less majestic, more mischievous. Children love him, so do sick people. You hang the cloth above your mat, just in case. You're also encouraged to participate in rituals for prevention, not just cure. These might involve monthly purifications, bathing in natron water at dawn while reciting hymns, or fasting on specific days to cleanse your inner humors. You don't always understand the reasoning, but the rhythm itself feels protective. There's comfort in pattern. In doing the same things your grandparents did, and their grandparents before them. Some people rely more on herbs and tonics, others on incantations and dreams, but most people in your village believe in a blended approach. If one method doesn't work, another might. If a god doesn't answer, a different one will. The point is to keep seeking, keep asking, and keep caring. You are not a passive body. You're a participant in your healing. Historians sometimes focus on Egyptian medicine as either advanced or absurd, but what they often miss is that faith and healing aren't opposites here. They're partners. And even if your lungs had healed on their own, would it have felt as meaningful without the chants, without the honey? Without your uncle sneaking a date into your bowl and winking? Eventually you return to your chores. Not all at once, but gradually. Your strength builds. Your sash feels less loose. You no longer need to sit down between tasks. The amulet remains around your neck, not because you're afraid, but because you remember. The day begins like it used to, before the cough, before the fig poultices and temple dreams. The air is warm, the clay beneath your sandals dry and cracked, and the Nile glitters at the edge of your vision like a ribbon tossed by the gods. You're back on your feet. Not completely cured, maybe, but capable again, and that's enough. Your first task? Water duty. Classic. You sling the yoke over your shoulders, 2 clay jugs hanging like sleepy companions, and make the slow walk to the river. It feels good to stretch. Your muscles ache, but in that satisfying human way that says, yes, I still work, I still move, I still matter. At the riverbank, other villagers are already at it, hauling, filling, chatting. A few recognize you and grin. One nudges you with his elbow and says, "So, the gods let you stay, did they?" You roll your eyes and smirk. That's Egyptian for welcome back. Work in ancient Egypt follows a rhythm, a heartbeat that pulses with the land, the river, the sun. Each season brings new tasks. During the inundation, there's time to repair tools, sharpen blades, and prepare for sowing. In harvest, the days stretch long, bodies bent, backs striped with sun. Even in illness, you've never forgotten this beat. You've just been dancing slowly. Now you catch up. Back home, you help your sister grind grain. The quern stone squeals with every pass, and your arms burn, but it feels almost meditative. You fall into sync with her motions, both of you silently mouthing the hymn to Renenutet, goddess of harvests, as if she's listening just around the corner. Later, you sweep the courtyard. You patch a roof reed. You sharpen the sickle. Small things, but essential, and each one brings you closer to feeling like yourself again. You notice, too, how others return to their work. The neighbor who'd been mourning now hums as she weaves. The potter, once silent, begins sculpting little hippos again, his signature animal. The boy who tried to steal honeyed nuts during the festival now delivers messages between households, his feet light with purpose. Historians sometimes portray Egyptian daily life as unchanging, a monotonous cycle of labor under a sun that never blinked, but that's a surface reading. Beneath the repetition, there's resilience. The work isn't just for survival. It's an expression of balance, of restoring Ma'at, the cosmic order. When you carry water, you're not just helping your family. You're participating in something vast and sacred. Even the gods work, after all. Ra sails his bark through the sky each day. Thoth scribes the minutes of existence. And you grind the grain, you fetch the water. You build the world in miniature. As the day winds down, you sit in the threshold with your legs stretched, a jug of warm beer at your side, and the sounds of the village wrapping around you like a linen cloak. Children's laughter, distant flute music, the splash of a jug tipped just wrong. You're tired, but you're back, and in this land of sun, stone, and story, that's a kind of miracle all its own. Evening descends like a soft veil, drawn gently over the landscape. The sun bleeds orange along the horizon, its light sliding across mud brick walls and flickering off shallow water jars. You settle in beside your family's doorway, the day's labor tucked neatly behind you. It's time for the oldest ritual of all, sitting still, breathing deep, and simply talking. Your mother lowers herself onto a mat beside you with a sigh that might register on a seismograph. She stretches her feet, one at a time, and gestures vaguely at the sky. "Clear," she says. "Good omen." Your brother joins too, chewing on something roasted and unidentifiable. He's terrible at small talk, so he just grunts in your direction. You nod back, conversation complete. The neighbors wander by in ones and twos. Some stay to chat, some just raise a hand as they pass. One man carries a basket of onions, another guides a sleepy goat. A girl, maybe 12, recites part of a poem she learned from the temple school, forgetting the last 2 lines and improvising something about Ra riding a crocodile. Everyone claps anyway. This is the real fabric of daily life in ancient Egypt, not scrolls, not battle records, but shared minutes, strung like beads across the thread of twilight. You sip from a cup of sweetened beer, barely fermented, more soothing than sharp. Someone else passes a tray of figs. You take one without asking. That's the rule. Anything past must be shared. Stories start to unspool. Your uncle talks about a storm he once saw bend the great obelisk of Heliopolis. No one believes him. A neighbor remembers the festival 2 years ago when someone accidentally let a bull into the sacred courtyard. Everyone believes that one. It's still hilarious. Your aunt tells of a woman who cured her son's stammer by rubbing his feet with goose fat and reciting hymns backward. No one knows if that works, but you mentally file it under useful, possibly messy. This is also when questions bloom, about the afterlife, about dreams, about why cats always seem to stare at nothing. You chime in with a question of your own. If the gods hear every prayer, how do they decide which ones to answer? Your mother shrugs and says, "Depends on the tone." Your brother adds, "And the offering." Everyone laughs. Historians often describe Egyptian evenings as uneventful. That's because they weren't there. They didn't hear the quiet jokes, the hum of someone patching a cloak by moonlight, or the slow dance of memory being passed, story by story, under the stars. These nights are how knowledge survives, how wounds heal, how children learn what matters most. The air cools, a breeze stirs the dust. You lie back and watch the stars blink into place, one by one. Somewhere, a child begins a lullaby. Someone else joins in, then another, until the melody floats like smoke through the alleys. There's no conductor, no plan, just the rhythm of evening, soft and shared. You breathe, you listen, you close your eyes. And for a moment, the entire world feels exactly as it should. Night settles fully now, deep and quiet, broken only by the distant rustle of date palms and the occasional cough from a sleeping neighbor. You've moved from the courtyard to your mat, unrolled beside the wall where it's coolest, nestled in linen that smells faintly of reed smoke and soap root. Overhead, the stars shimmer in silver clusters, so many, so bright, you feel as if you could dip your hand in the sky and stir them. As your body sinks into stillness, your mind drifts. This is dreaming time, but not just the sleep kind. In ancient Egypt, night was a doorway. Sleep wasn't just for rest. It was a passage, a sacred act, a chance to encounter the divine in shadow and silence. And tonight, like every night, you begin with a story. Your grandmother used to tell you one, about Nut, the sky goddess, who swallowed the sun each evening and gave birth to it every dawn. You can almost hear her voice now, slow and steady, her hand tracing shapes in the air. Nut stretches across the world, she'd whisper. That's her belly above you now. The stars are her children. Sleep under them, and you are safe. These myths aren't bedtime distractions. They're anchors. Rituals in word form, passed on through centuries of repetition. Each one holds a lesson about death, renewal, loyalty, fate. And each night, as the village settles, you find comfort in them, like a favorite blanket that never fades. You whisper another tale to yourself, one about Khonsu, the moon god who travels the sky in his silver bark. Some say he collects the dreams of the living and delivers them to the gods. Others say he simply watches, silently, waiting to heal what the day has bruised. Tonight, your own dream feels close. You can feel it behind your eyelids, just out of reach, just a flicker of image and sound. A temple you haven't visited, a field of golden wheat, someone laughing, not loudly, but with that soft warmth that makes your chest loosen. You shift slightly and hear your brother mumble in his sleep. A cat pads across the threshold, silent and self-important. Somewhere beyond the fields, a priest chants a midnight hymn, low and droning as part of the temple's perpetual offering to the gods. Even while you sleep, the divine machinery keeps turning. Historians study these nightly myths, the symbolism, the religious structure. But what they often overlook is the personal layer, the way these stories aren't just about the gods, but about you. About surviving another day, about accepting what can't be changed, about finding stillness amid repetition. The stars turn slowly above. Nut breathes. The Nile murmurs like a lullaby. And you, wrapped in linen and legend, begin to slide into sleep, not abruptly but gently like a boat leaving the shore. Your breath evens, your limbs grow heavy. And somewhere, in the vast hush of night, a god pauses to listen. You don't remember when the stars fade, only that at some point your eyes are closed and the boundaries between the world outside and the world inside begin to dissolve. You lie there on your mat, wrapped in warmth and silence, the linen soft against your skin, and feel the weight of nothing. Not absence, not void, just the gentle stillness that comes when everything is where it should be. The fires from the early evening have long since smoldered down to ash. Even the cicadas have gone quiet. The Nile, just out of sight, glides along with its own slow rhythm, as it always has. Somewhere in the distance, the temple drums mark the last watch of the night, a thud barely perceptible but familiar, like a heartbeat far away in the earth. Your thoughts scatter like sand, caught in a breeze. One moment you're remembering the way garlic stung your nose in the healer's hut. The next, it's the image of Sekhmet, tall and gleaming, her lion's eyes closing gently, just before she disappears behind the temple curtain. Then nothing, then a fig tree, then the voice of your mother, not speaking, just humming in the kitchen a week ago. These aren't dreams, not yet. They're the whispers that come just before, the liminal voices of a mind gently letting go. Historians call this era the time of gods and laborers, of pyramids and pharaohs. They tell you about grain counts, king lists, and wars fought over reeds and pride. But they don't always tell you this, the quietness of an Egyptian night, the breath of nut arched over your home, the knowledge that in this moment you are both entirely mortal and entirely eternal. Because here's the secret. To the ancient Egyptians, sleep was rehearsal for the next world, for the journey into the afterlife. Each night was a sacred crossing, with your dreams acting as maps, as warnings, as blessings. The body rested, the soul wandered. And when Ra returned in the morning, so did you. Your amulet rests gently on your chest. It's warm from your skin. The circle drawn in sand earlier today by your aunt has already faded, but its memory still lingers, just like the scent of the incense from the temple. Nothing is permanent here, not even fear. Especially not fear. You sigh, a deep one from the diaphragm. The kind of sigh that signals I am finished for today. There's no more to be done. The jars are full. The grain is stored. The words have been spoken. And in the hush that follows, something inside you, call it spirit or breath or just a very tired brain, begins to float. The linen shifts slightly with your breathing. The stars glide overhead in their ancient procession, and the gods, wherever they are, smile with eyes half closed. There is nothing to fear, nothing to solve, only stillness. Only sleep, only the promise of another golden morning. Word count. 500, wind down, 300 words. So now, just rest. There's nothing more to imagine, no stories left to untangle, just the fading impressions of warm sunlight, the scent of river reeds, and the comfortable weight of a day well lived. Your body, stretched and stilled under linen sheets, feels heavier now. a stone settling into sand. Each breath is longer than the last, drawn not in urgency, but in peace. You are no longer a character in the past. You are no longer walking roads paved by gods or whispering to temple cats. You are simply here, breathing, floating, letting go. The world around you, the wind brushing dried palm fronds, the gentle thud of your heartbeat has shrunk to a circle of calm. Outside it, history ticks onward, but inside, everything is slow, kind, soft. Sleep in the ancient world was sacred, not an inconvenience, but a gift. A nightly pilgrimage, welcomed by dreams, protected by charms, and healed by time. The Egyptians believed the soul left the body each night to walk among stars and spirits, but always it returned with the dawn. And yours will too. So let the images slip away now. Let the sand smooth your memories. Let the moon roll on in silence above your home. You are part of a story told by thousands of voices across thousands of years, and tonight you rest in its cradle. Good night.